Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Batman's Owl Godfather. Chapter 81. What a strange professor. This is what comes naturally to Bruce. I don't know what courses this gentleman is responsible for teaching and what makes him so good. After a while, Hermione came back. Judging from the expression on her face, she probably didn't find Harry and the others. When Hermione walked into the box and found that there was an old wizard, she was stunned for a moment. But soon she realized that this was a professor. After politely saying hello, she sat back in her seat. For some reason, Hermione felt that this old wizard looked familiar, as if she had seen him somewhere. Harry and Ron didn't seem to get in the car. Hermione whispered to Bruce. Percy said they came to the station together, but for some reason they disappeared later. As she spoke, a picture began to form in her mind. Harry and Ron were fed up with the rules and regulations of the school and decided to join hands to the free world and start their own big adventure. No, Hermione suddenly shouted, how could they do this? The outside world is very dangerous, there are werewolves, vampires, dominatrixes. Bruce was confused. These are the monsters mentioned in Lockhart's books. Cadam said in his ear, Hermione may be obsessed with stardom recently. At this time, Professor Gale, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke. The Harry and Ron you are talking about are two little boys, one with black hair and glasses, and the other with red hair and a silly look. Yes, Hermione said in surprise. Professor, have you seen them? Gale pointed out. Aren't they just outside? Bruce and Hermione looked out the window and saw a green car flying in the air, accelerating to catch up with the Hogwarts train. The car rose and fell, and the two boys in the car who kept screaming were Harry and Ron. Why are they there? Hermione was almost going crazy. Why could these two guys do such shocking things every time? Bruce was a little moved. A flying car, I really want to drive it. Professor Gale was also looking at the car, but the target of his gaze was the location of the lightning scar on Harry's forehead. How interesting. He kicked his suitcase and said softly, why do I seem to feel another you in him? The suitcase kept shaking. The train arrived at the station and the students began to get off the train. Gale said goodbye to Bruce and Hermione, they would see each other soon. Freshmen, come to me. Hagrid waved his lantern from the other side of the platform, beckoning the first years to come over and cross the lake in the traditional way. Bruce, Hermione and the others followed the other students to a rough muddy path outside. There were at least 100 carriages waiting for the remaining classmates, and in front of each carriage stood a skinny black horse-shaped creature. Their heads are very similar to those of fire dragons, their eyes are occupied by white, and a pair of tough wings grow between their shoulder bones. Seeing such a terrifying creature, the little wizards around him didn't react at all, which surprised Bruce. Bruce, Hermione and Neville got into a carriage, which smelled faintly of musty and straw. How was your summer vacation? Neville. Only then did Bruce have the opportunity to say hello to Neville. I brought you a gift from the United States and will give it to you at school later. Oh, Bruce. Neville was so excited that he hugged Bruce, and he almost cried, thank you. I thought you wouldn't remember it at all. It's okay, we're friends. Bruce imitated Cadam's tone and said, between friends, you have to exchange sincerity for sincerity. The carriage drove up to two imposing wrought iron gates flanked by stone pillars topped by winged boars. They got out of the car and followed the crowd up the stone steps, passed through the majestic oak doors, and entered the great hall of Hogwarts. Countless candles were suspended in midair, the entire hall was illuminated magnificently, and the stars on the enchanted ceiling were bright. Cadam looked at this scene and couldn't help but praise it. It's so beautiful, the auditorium. Bruce arrived at the Hufflepuff long table, where Justin was already sitting. Good evening, Bruce. Justin looked very happy. I heard that you went to the United States during the summer vacation. How did it feel? There must be a lot of fun things in the United States, right? Bruce couldn't help but think about the America he saw in Twilight Wolf's world. It's fun. He hesitated. At this time, all the little wizards had taken their seats. Dumbledore tapped the goblet in front of him with his spoon, and the auditorium fell silent instantly. Welcome. Dumbledore stood up, candlelight shining on his beard. Welcome back to Hogwarts. I have a few things to tell you all. I'm excited to announce that we will have 3 new teachers joining us in the new school year. First, there was Professor Gilderoy Lockhart, who readily agreed to fill the defense against the dark arts vacancy. The auditorium burst into warm applause, and Lockhart stood up and saluted around him with his perfect smile. The applause broke out even louder, and several little witches even screamed. As for our second new teacher, Dumbledore finally suppressed the applause and continued, I regret to tell you that our Care of Magical Creatures teacher, Professor Kettleburn, has decided to retire 1 year early, and his position will be vacant by one of our teachers. Outstanding alumni, Professor Newt Scamander fills in. Wow! There was another burst of applause that was enough to lift the roof. Mr. Newt's name was not only well known in the wizarding world, but also known to all women and children. Professor Newt seemed a little uncomfortable with such a passionate scene. He quickly stood up, bowed, and then sat down. The last one. Dumbledore spoke in a longer tone, choosing his words carefully. For reasons that everyone knows, the magical world is no longer as safe as before. For everyone's sake, we decided to restart the dueling club and open a wizard dueling course. And the person who serves as the dueling teacher is Professor Gale Green. A few cold, sparse applause sounded in the auditorium. Compared with the treatment of the first two teachers, it can be said to be a world of difference. The students were really not interested in this strange-looking old man with a gloomy aura who appeared out of nowhere, and were even a little afraid. And Mr. Green doesn't seem to be that popular among teachers. Everyone was far away from him, except Mr. Newt, who did not dislike him and was willing to sit next to him. Gale Green snorted coldly, not even willing to stand up and say hello. Dumbledore didn't push anything and continued. What he said after that was the same old talk, such as school rules and so on. At the end of his speech, Dumbledore repeated those strange words. Idiot, crying, residue, screw it, thank you everyone. What does this mean? Bruce asked Kadam. He says it every time. I think it's probably some kind of code word. Kadam blew his feathers. Hogwarts Castle is so big, Dumbledore might have left some secret treasure. And the key to unlocking Dumbledore's mystery is those 4 words. The sorting ceremony for the new school year began, this time hosted by Professor Flitwick, the head of Ravenclaw. Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape were standing by the door, seemingly discussing something. Bruce could vaguely hear, "You don't have to plead anymore, Severus." Professor McGonagall said angrily, "At least 7 muggles saw what they did, and they must pay the price for their actions." "But the car belongs to the Weasley family," Snape argued. "I guess it's enough to punish Weasley alone. Harry is innocent." "Severus, I am the head of Gryffindor," Professor McGonagall said, displeased. They seemed to be discussing Harry and Ron's speeding car. Bruce stopped eavesdropping. He just sighed. Snape was so kind to Harry. At this time, Justin came close to Bruce. "Bruce, did you go to Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry during your summer vacation?" Bruce didn't know why Justin asked so suddenly. He remained calm and just said, "No, my schedule is too tight and I don't have time to go." "That's a shame," Justin said with emotion. "People in Ilvermorny have been in panic these past 2 months. The grave of Isolde, the founder of their school, was dug up, and even the snakewood tree next to the grave was gone." The grave is dug. Bruce is extremely sensitive to this kind of topic now. Maybe it's Barbados, pursuers again, digging graves and resurrecting corpses. But when I heard about the snake tree, I thought it might not be the case. Salazar Slytherin. He thought of this name. Maybe the prisoner was none other than the founder of Hogwarts. Isolde's grave was dug up not for the body, but to get back his wand. Now it seems that he has succeeded. "Kadam, I have a question," Bruce suddenly said. "Isn't Slytherin the founder of Hogwarts? Then he should be a highly respected wizard educator. Why did he behave like a dark wizard after his resurrection? Isn't this normal?" Kadam said. "What gave you the illusion that the 4 founders are very kind?" Bruce didn't understand what the owl meant. If he said so, wouldn't the 4 founders of Hogwarts still be bad people? "Think about wizarding history, Bruce," Kadam reminded. "Think about how wizards lived in the early days." Bruce began to recall the contents of the history of magic books. In the eyes of many people, wizards with magic are far superior to muggles. But actually the opposite is true. Before the establishment of Hogwarts, the living conditions of wizards were very poor. They lived in seclusion in Muggle villages, often disguising themselves as herbalists or doctors in exchange for the opportunity to coexist with Muggles. They have never been superior to others. Instead, they have struggled to survive in the cracks. The reason why this happens is spell. Bruce suddenly realized the crux of the problem. The wizards back then would not easily disclose the spells they mastered to others, because this was the basis for their survival. That's right, Bruce. Kadam nodded and said, because of the mutual concealment between wizards, many powerful spells only exist in the collections of some pure-blood families and will never be disclosed to the outside world. Even the levitation curse, which is now required for first-year students, was something that was out of reach in the eyes of many wild wizards at that time. How could a wizard who only mastered 1 or 2 spells be able to fight against the xenophobic muggles? This is natural, but the 4 founders changed all that. Kadam said, look at the Hogwarts library now. There are no banned books. Where do you think these come from? Bruce finally understood. Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, Slytherin. The reason why these 4 founders are great is that they transcended the limitations of the times. They integrated all the magical heritage in the wizarding world at that time and placed it within Hogwarts, and announced that any wizard can come to Hogwarts to study. Hogwarts is always open to all little wizards. Greatness does not come from strength. There is no discrimination. This is the real greatness of the 4 founders. So now comes the problem. When the 4 founders were collecting various spells and inheritances, did they just tell others and they would hand them over obediently? Absolutely impossible. The road to the founding of Hogwarts is a road full of blood and iron. For the greater good, the 4 founders joined forces to penetrate Europe, making all wizard families bow their heads and hand over their family's inheritance, at least most of it. How could such a person just have the amiable and smiling image in the portrait? Bruce now fully understands why Godric and Salazar, who were obviously lifelong friends, ended up breaking up. Because Salazar's heart has changed. He went against the purpose of Hogwarts, which is to teach without distinction, and opposed Muggle-born children entering Hogwarts. This kind of behavior is tantamount to letting the long-cherished aspirations of the founders go to waste. So, all Salazar's current actions are just to realize his original ideal. Bruce asked, creating a new Hogwarts? I don't know, maybe he has a deeper reason. Kadam shook his head, not wanting to go any further on this issue. He was not Salazar. How could he know what Salazar was thinking? The only thing that is certain now is that Rowena and Helga will not get involved with Salazar. Kadam was actually a little curious. Salazar has already gone to the United States and got his magic wand, so where are the other 2 founders? After Jason leaves, they should slowly find their true feelings. It's not like there has been no news for so long. At this moment, during the sorting ceremony, the sorting hat suddenly called out a name. Ravenna Royal. Kadam suddenly turned around and looked at the first-year wizards. A little witch with long black hair walked out of the crowd. Although she was young, she could already tell that she was a beauty. There was just a hint of teasing and contempt in the eyes he looked at others. Ravenna sat on the chair, and Professor Flitwick picked up the sorting hat and prepared to put it on her head. But the sorting hat didn't even touch her hair and shouted loudly. Ravenclaw. The long table in Ravenclaw House instantly burst into a burst of applause, welcoming this cute little witch to join them. Oh my God. The owl covered its face with its wings. No more guessing. He knew the whereabouts of one of the founders. The sorting ceremony ended quickly. Except for Kadam, no one noticed anything suspicious about Ravenna. She may have cast a spell on her identity to prevent others from suspecting her. As the dinner ended, the young wizards followed their prefects back to their respective common rooms. The first day of school is over. In the early morning, Bruce woke up from his sleep and saw an egg-shaped bird's nest beside his bed. It was made of branches and hay, and the entrance of the hole was blocked with a piece of cloth as a curtain. There is also a line of precautions written on the door. Kadam's home, please do not disturb. Bruce knocked on the bird's nest, and the owl's head emerged from the curtain. What? He said in a bad tone. What are you doing? Bruce asked curiously. Keep your voice down. Kadam shushed, then waved his wings, indicating that Bruce could come and see for himself. Bruce opened the door curtain, and suddenly there was a suction force, and his whole body was sucked into the bird's nest. When he stood firm, Bruce realized that although the bird's nest didn't look big from the outside, it actually had a huge space after entering. The interior of the bird's nest is cleverly divided into two areas, with one side arranged like an exquisite apartment. It was fully furnished, and it was obviously a comfortable nest that Kadam had built for himself. The space on the other side has been completely converted into a private workshop. The workbench took up prime position, and on it Bruce saw the fragments of Mjolnir. There was a small blacksmith stove next to it, and a small nest was built next to the stove with an egg on it. "Is this the egg you stole from the vault?" Bruce asked curiously. "How to talk," Kadam corrected. "This egg has a fate with me, I just brought it to a more suitable place." Bruce had no intention of arguing with the owl. He looked at the eggs in the nest and felt something was wrong. This egg was obtained from Kingpin, who raised dinosaurs. Bruce reminded, "Be careful, and a Tyrannosaurus Rex hatches in the castle." "Isn't Dad Death Dragon a good match for you?" Kadam said casually, then lowered his head and sighed. "Whether this egg can hatch is still a question. I have always been able to raise it to death." Hearing what the owl said, Bruce immediately changed his tune. "It's okay, just hatch them for fun. There are a lot of pets in Hogwarts, including snakes and spiders. The school doesn't care much about them." "Indeed." Kadam looked very free and easy. "Even if he is discovered in the end, you will be the one to bear the blame." "Bruce." Kadam pushed Bruce out of the door before he could react. "Okay, let's stop talking and go have breakfast. The first class today is Lockhart's class, don't miss it." Breakfast at Hogwarts is typically large and filling. On the long tables of the four houses, there were bowls of porridge, plates of pickled herrings, mountains of bread slices, and plates of eggs and bacon. The meal was not boring either. Mrs. Weasley sent Ron a roaring letter, which made the whole hall very lively. Bruce drank 3 bowls of porridge just because of this. After breakfast, the Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw wizards headed to Lockhart's classroom. After the class was seated, Lockhart cleared his throat loudly to silence everyone. He was still dressed in the same exquisite style, with flowing blue and silver robes, and a blue and silver hat with gold rims on top of his shiny blonde hair. It seems there are still changes, Kadam thought. Lockhart in the original book knows how to dress well, and the wizard robes he wears almost every day are of a different color. But things are different now. Kadam has seen Lockhart 3 times, and the color of his clothes has not changed. They were all blue and silver, the colors of Ravenclaw. Maybe it was because of Ravenclaw's resurrection that Lockhart started to gain popularity. As expected of him, Lockhart held up a copy of Breaking with the Ghost in his hand, showing the photo of himself winking on the cover. He pointed at his photo and winked and said, "Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin 3rd Class, honorary member of the Defense League Against Dark Arts, winner of the Wizarding Weekly Most Charming Smile Award 5 times, but I don't talk about that, I don't drive away Wanloon's female ghosts with my smile." The little witches below were immediately fascinated by Lockhart's humility. Lockhart said cheerfully, "I see you've all bought the complete set of my books, that's great. I thought we'd do a little quiz today. Don't be afraid, just see how well you read and how much you understand." Sure enough, no matter how the outside world changes, Lockhart is still Lockhart. He still handed out a test paper, which was filled with personal questions about himself. Bruce vaguely remembered that he seemed to be taking a Defense Against the Dark Arts class. "I know the answers to these," Kadam said over his shoulder. "I can help you get full marks." Bruce decisively rejected the owl's proposal. For him, getting full marks was more embarrassing than handing in a blank paper. The half-hour answering time was extremely difficult. When the test paper was handed in, Lockhart looked at it and twitched. It seemed that everyone had answered poorly. "It seems that everyone hasn't prepared enough," he said. "I don't even know the simplest question, my secret ambition. The answer is actually very simple." The owl added smoothly, "Eradicating evil in the world and selling his line of hair lotions. It means that people all over the world can live for themselves." Kadam suddenly froze. He remembered that the answer he said was correct. Why did Lockhart change it? Bruce couldn't help but joked. "It seems you are not a real Lockhart fan." Kadam ignored him and just looked at Lockhart with a puzzled look. "Actually, I have always thought that everyone is too tired to live today." Lockhart smiled and said to the students in the audience, "Many people, or most people, are living for their own obsessions. I hope they can let go of this obsession, be their true selves, and be happy. A little, isn't it?" This was simply not something Lockhart could say. A little wizard raised his hand in the audience and asked a question. Professor, what is obsession? Oh, that's too much. Lockhart thought for a while and said, whatever you can't ask for or let go of, in my opinion, such people are fools. The little wizards looked at each other. They had no idea what Lockhart was talking about. Oh, sorry, I think I said it a little too profoundly. Lockhart apologized to the students and winked, but you were lucky, because before you were exposed to these, you met the most perfect person, that is me. If you feel confused in the future, you can think of my smile, at least it belongs to each of you. After saying something specious, as if he was sarcastically speaking to someone, Lockhart returned to the topic. Okay, let's start class now. It is different from the magic stick that Lockhart showed just now. The level of his teaching is still so bad. The so-called black magic teaching is to capture a group of Cornish elves and let the students deal with them. These elves were causing trouble in the classroom, but Lockhart was helpless. Finally, Bruce intervened to stop the farce. Great, I remember your name is Wayne, right? After all the elves were packed back into their cages, Lockhart, with his hair like a chicken coop, said to Bruce. You did a great job, a bit like me. Hufflepuff will get 10 points for you. After the defense against the dark arts class, Bruce solidified his idea. You'll learn nothing by following Lockhart. He said to Kadam, you said he could teach me how to fabricate a character, but a character without strength support cannot be maintained at all. Dumbledore is too stupid. He lets all the teachers go to school. Speaking of Dumbledore, Bruce suddenly remembered that he and Dumbledore had an agreement last school year. Learn something from Dumbledore every week. I don't know if it counts, but if Lockhart can't do it, he might as well go over and beat the old man. With this thought in mind, Bruce went to the principal's office after finishing his afternoon herbal medicine class. It's still the same ugly stone beast, but the password has changed for the second year. But obviously Dumbledore guessed that Bruce would come, and he asked a portrait next to the passage to leave an answer for Bruce. Lemon ice cream. When Bruce entered the headmaster's office, Dumbledore was inside. Oh, Bruce, I was just thinking, it's almost time for you to arrive. Dumbledore chuckled. The time I was waiting for you reminded me of the time when I first came to teach at Hogwarts. Mr. Principal. Bruce said hello, not knowing what to say for a moment. Don't be so formal. You can sit wherever you want in this office from now on. Dumbledore said, I have carefully arranged several courses. I believe you will not feel that your trip was in vain. Bruce sat on the chair and listened to the principal continue. Before I became the principal, I was a transfiguration teacher. I was somewhat confident in the art of transfiguration. Dumbledore looked at Bruce quietly through his half-moon eyes. Bruce, are you interested in becoming an animagus? Animagus are wizards who can transform into animals. For example, Professor McGonagall can turn into a cat. Bruce thought for a while and asked, can I turn into a giant squid like Gryffindor? Well, that's not good. Dumbledore shook his head and said, Mr. Gryffindor transformed into a magical creature. Strictly speaking, he should be called Mythmagus. Such magic is too difficult for you. In the known magic world, Mr. Gryffindor is the only one who has mastered this magic. What is the known world of magic? Does that mean there are still places where people don't know about it? Bruce had a feeling that Dumbledore was close to it if not the Mythmagus. He nodded and didn't press any further. Haste makes waste. No matter how powerful the Mythmagus is, he still has to learn the most basic transformation. The second course I prepared for you is a spell called the Patronus Charm. Dumbledore introduced, this is the oldest and most powerful defensive spell in the wizarding world. It can drive away evil and can also be transformed into a protective spell. And this spell has many secrets that we haven't solved yet. After that, Dumbledore motioned to Bruce to choose which course to start first. After Bruce thought for a moment, he gave the answer, I want to learn the Patronus Charm first, Mr. Principal. Very thoughtful choice. Dumbledore praised, in that case, let's start this Sunday. My old man is also curious about what kind of Patronus you will have. It must be a bat, Bruce thought. After agreeing on a time with Dumbledore, he left the principal's office. Bruce was actually not very satisfied with this trip. What I want to learn is attack spells, such as Dumbledore's famous move to clear the way for the God of Fire. Bruce said to the owl, but the principal doesn't seem to be willing to teach me. He only wants to teach me transformation and defense. What good could this do? Bruce thought of the time when he faced Deathstroke. In that situation, he couldn't even break through the opponent's defense. If he had a powerful enough magic move at that time, he wouldn't be so passive. Animagus and the Patronus curse obviously cannot play a role in turning the overall situation around. Don't be too pushy, Bruce. Kadam said, whether it's a spell or magic, it actually depends on how you use it. That's all he said, and he didn't say much more. Bruce actually has this shortcoming. He is very smart and very logical, but his imagination is not very good. Kadam remembers that in the comics, Batman wears a yellow lantern ring and has the power to turn his imagination into reality. But in the end, Batman only knew how to keep throwing out a few broken bats, without any creativity in his moves. But I can understand your idea of wanting to learn powerful spells. The owl said to Bruce, in fact, I have already planned it, and I guarantee that Dumbledore can explode the gold coins. Really? Bruce was delighted. Kadam really cared about him. Owl certainly cared about him. Whatever Bruce learned, he would get back tenfold. This also meant that Kadam's motivation was 10 times stronger than Bruce's. They walked towards the steps of the hallway, one man and one bird. At this moment, Bruce suddenly heard a very strange sound. It was as if someone was talking in his ear, a man and a woman, they were talking and laughing. But when Bruce calmed down and listened, the sound disappeared again. Bruce, what's wrong? Kadam found that something was wrong with Bruce, and he said with unprecedented seriousness, why are you crying? Ah, Bruce touched his face, and 2 lines of tears had already flowed down unconsciously. He cried, I don't know. Bruce's voice trembled a little. I just heard someone talking. The voice was very familiar. I've heard it, but when I wanted to know who it was, my mind seemed to be separated by a layer of gauze, and I couldn't think clearly about anything. Voice. Kadam frowned. Hearing the sound in the second year, wasn't that a scene from Harry Potter? And that was the sound of the basilisk, which was killed by Dumbledore after Slytherin left last school year. The bodies were taken away. Then, at this moment, a scream came from a distance. Kadam and Bruce looked at each other and ran towards the direction of the sound. When they arrived, there was already a circle of people around, and they couldn't squeeze in at all. All they could see was a line of words written on the wall. Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Sorry, give way. Bruce struggled to squeeze into the crowd, and then saw the scene of being surrounded. His heart suddenly sank. A female student had her eyes closed and her life or death was uncertain. Professor McGonagall had arrived and held her in her arms. Bruce knew this girl, who was in the same grade as him, from Gryffindor House, and she seemed to be named Lavender Brown. Kadam said softly. A very cheerful little girl who likes to express her mood with body language and has the innocence and romance that belongs to her age. Someone was crying next to her. It was Lavender's friend Parvati Patil. We just separated for a while. Parvati sobbed. We were chatting just now, and she said she had someone she liked. Bruce looked silently at Lavender on the ground. She closed her eyes, breathed evenly, and had a smile on her lips, quiet and strange. It doesn't look like he was attacked at all, just like he fell asleep. But Professor McGonagall had used various methods, but could not wake her up from her dream. At this time, Dumbledore came, followed by several teachers, Snape, Flitwick, Sprout and other professors, but Lockhart, who loved to join in the fun, was not there. The crowd naturally parted a lane to let the teachers pass. Minerva, let me see. Dumbledore bent down, murmured something strange, and tapped Lavender with his wand, but there was no response. Lavender's eyes were still closed, showing no sign of waking up. It's a very powerful sleeping spell. Dumbledore's eyes flickered, and he stood up. But it doesn't matter, I have a solution, it just takes a little time. The crowd around him breathed a sigh of relief, thankful that they had a well-informed principal. At this time, Kadam said in Bruce's ear, Dumbledore has nothing to do, he is just trying to stabilize people's hearts. I can see it, Bruce whispered. What kind of curse is this that even Dumbledore can't break? Bruce raised his head and looked at the words on the wall. Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Only then did he see that there was actually a line of small words below, but it had just been blocked by the crowd. There is no liberation for fools. Fool, relief. At this moment, an idea flashed in Bruce's mind. For some reason, he suddenly thought of the defense against the dark arts class in the morning and Lockhart's string of Riddler-like words. Whatever you can't ask for or let go of, in my opinion, such people are fools. Most people live for their own obsessions. If you feel confused in the future, you can think of my smile. Smile. Bruce turned his head suddenly and looked at the weird smile on Lavender's face. With a bang, his thoughts were instantly opened. Lockhart has a problem. Bruce took Tatum and walked along the third-floor corridor towards Lockhart's office. He knocked on the door, but no one responded. Open the Allaho hole. Bruce opened the door directly with the unlocking spell. Lockhart was inside, pacing the office with a restless look. He was visibly startled when the door was opened. After seeing that the person coming was Bruce, he breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, visible anger appeared on his face. Classmate Wayne, your behavior is so rude. I knocked on the door. Bruce closed the door behind him. Professor, I have a question for you. He pulled out the Supreme Wand and approached Lockhart step by step. I hope you can answer truthfully. Let's change our sincerity. By the way, before I came here, I had applied various defensive spells and counter curses on myself, which could at least block a few attacks. There is also a little magic. If you attack me, Dumbledore will get the message immediately. Lockhart could no longer maintain his image. He forced a smile and said, Why should I attack you? He said this, but he still raised his wand tremblingly. Expelliarmus. Bruce took immediate action and knocked Lockhart's wand away. Lockhart screamed and crouched on the ground shivering. No, don't, he said with great fear, don't stab me with your heart. Bruce's expression suddenly felt strange. That's it. Did you find the wrong person? Also, why did his first reaction be that he would use a cone to pierce the bones? Was he tortured by the Cruciatus curse? Bruce grabbed Lockhart by the collar and pointed the Supreme Wand at his throat. It seems you feel guilty. I didn't. I'm really innocent. Lockhart was about to burst into tears. I know something happened. Did a student die? It wasn't me. I'm a victim too. Bruce pressed the Supreme Wand a little deeper. What's going on? Tell me clearly. I said. Lockhart had no backbone and simply chose to surrender. After Bruce let go, he fell to the ground and cried and said, I really don't know anything. You must have come to me because of what I said in class, right? You are very smart, but you used it in the wrong place. Those words are not what I want to say. Someone taught me to say them. I will show you the evidence. I will show you the evidence. Lockhart stumbled, trying to open the desk drawer. Bruce directly stopped his movement and instead used the unlocking spell to open the drawer. Throughout the process, he kept Lockhart in front of him to prevent any traps. Fortunately, there wasn't. There was only a stack of parchment inside, with a few lines of text written on the top one, exactly what Lockhart said in class. Who taught you to say this? Bruce shouted. I don't know. Lockhart went crazy. I had just accepted the invitation to teach when a man broke into my house. That man was dressed in black robes, let alone his appearance. I don't even know whether he is a boy or a girl. When he came up, he snatched my wand and beat me violently. If I hadn't tried my best to protect my face, my handsome appearance would have been ruined. The more Lockhart talked, the more he broke down, and by the end he was crying. He also tortured me with the Cruciatus curse and forced me to do what he said. These are the words he asked me to say. Seeing the other person like this, Bruce suddenly sympathized with Lockhart and felt that what he said might be true. Not because of the impeccable story itself, but because of Lockhart's performance. He looks really miserable. If this were his acting skills, he would be able to kill all current actors instantly. You really didn't do it. Bruce withdrew his wand. It's really not me. I promise you. Lockhart was about to kneel down to Bruce. I'm not a bad person. If this person shows up again, I will tell you immediately. All right. Bruce withdrew his wand and decided to let Lockhart go for the time being. I'll keep an eye on you. He finally said this, then slammed the door and left. Just then, Lockhart slowly stood up, a sneer appearing on his face. If I say it's not me, then it really isn't me. He said coldly, as expected, children are children, they are so easy to deceive. Bang! The door to the office was kicked open, and Bruce walked in again with his wand raised. He shouted angrily, "Lockhart, I knew you were lying, let me catch you now." Lockhart didn't hesitate. He smiled lightly, raised his hands, and knelt directly on the ground. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Bruce had never seen anyone so shameless. At this time, Lockhart had no idle baggage and lay directly on the ground, explaining his behavior just now and begging Bruce for mercy. "I just want to find some face for myself." His voice trembled. "After all, I am the recipient of the third-level Order of Merlin. I was threatened but didn't resist at all. If word spread, my image would be ruined. But I really am not the person you were looking for. If you don't believe it, you can use legilimency on me." After saying that, Lockhart closed his eyes, looking like he was ready to be slaughtered. Bruce was almost amused by Lockhart's rogue behavior. He didn't believe the nonsense at all, but he didn't use legilimency on Lockhart. Who knows if this guy knows occlumency? Forget it, Professor Lockhart, get up. Bruce was no longer as murderous as before, but put away his wand and helped Lockhart to his seat. Lockhart was a little flattered and didn't understand why Bruce's attitude changed so quickly. "Don't look at me like that, Mr. Lockhart, you are the teacher." Bruce said, "I was trying to find the prisoner just now, so I seemed a little rude." "Professor, you don't blame me, do you?" "No, no, of course not." Lockhart waved his hands repeatedly, indicating that he didn't take what happened just now into his mind at all. "That's good. I'm also worried that if my threat to the professor spreads, I will be expelled from the school." Bruce patted Lockhart on the shoulder. "Then what happened today should be treated as a secret between the two of us. I will come to ask questions often in the future, Professor." To Lockhart's ears, these words had a completely different meaning. That's a naked threat, so Lockhart immediately patted his chest and promised, "Don't worry, we have a common secret, we are on the same team, and I will definitely keep it secret." After that, he opened his arms. "Come, let me hug you to show my sincerity." Bruce pushed him away, and the ghost wanted to hug him. "I hope you didn't lie to me today, Professor, so we can still get along." Bruce finally sighed and said, "I actually don't like to use violence at all. After all, I'm not a devil." After saying this, he really left. Lockhart waited for a while to make sure Bruce was gone, then slowly stood up from the chair. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Everything is within my plan." Bang! The wind shook the windows. Babble! Lockhart instantly crouched down with his head in his hands, and with lightning speed, hid under the table. Bruce and Kadam were walking back to the common room. "We'll see what Lockhart does next." Bruce said, "If he didn't report me, it means there is something wrong in his heart." He didn't believe in the good in Lockhart's heart, so he bet on his evil. "Actually, there's no need to go to such trouble, right?" Kadam said, "You can definitely go to Snape's warehouse and steal some Veritaserum. I've been there, and there are a lot of good things." Bruce shook his head, indicating that he was unwilling to use this method. "Both the Veritaserum and the Hex, they all have flaws." Bruce said, "If I rely on this kind of thing, sooner or later I'm going to fall into a big hole. In this world, except for the unforgivable curse, every curse has a counter-curse. Likewise, any magic potion also has an antidote. In many cases, most problems can be solved by simply inserting a bezoar into the throat. That's up to you." Kadam no longer insisted. They turned a corner and soon arrived at Hufflepuff's common room. However, at this time, Bruce saw Dumbledore standing at the door, seemingly waiting for someone. "Oh, Bruce, I was just wondering when you would come back." When Dumbledore saw Bruce, there was a kind smile in his eyes. Apparently he was waiting for Bruce. "Professor Dumbledore, are you looking for me?" Bruce asked. "Yes, I have something to ask you." Dumbledore said calmly, "I observed before that you seem to get along well with Professor Gale Green." Bruce frowned inwardly. Why does this old man seem to know everything? Does he have spies all over the world? "Yes, Mr. Principal." Bruce did not deny it. "I met him once on the train." "That would be great." Dumbledore breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Actually, I would like to ask you to find Professor Gale and let him study this thing." He took out a test tube from the wizard's robe, with a silver thread floating inside. "This is a memory I took out of Miss Brown's mind, but it is completely uninterpretable. Dumbledore sighed. It is contaminated by a very dark magic. Maybe Professor Gale has a way to deal with this situation. Bruce understood what the principal meant. Are you asking him to find Professor Gale Green for help? But, Mr. Principal, why don't you go by yourself? Bruce asked doubtfully. I'm just a student, I shouldn't be as proud as you, right? Oh Bruce, there are very complicated reasons here, and it's hard for me to explain to you. Dumbledore handed the test tube to Bruce. In short, I have used up my last favor with Professor Gale, and now I can only ask you for help. Okay. Bruce didn't understand why Dumbledore wanted to be a Riddler. But it's okay to help casually. After all, he still needs to learn magic from the old man later. In Kadam's words, let the old man explode gold coins. Bruce came to Professor Gale's door, knocked gently, and the door opened by itself. This was the first time Bruce entered Professor Gale's office, and the layout inside was very different from other offices. There were all kinds of things that looked like black magic props in the room, but Bruce didn't feel gloomy. Because on the table not far away, there was a music box that was playing music in a loop. The sound was light and soothing, which reminded Bruce of summer. There was also an illusory little figure on the music box, a spirited young man, who seemed to have just finished a grand performance and was making a perfect curtain call. Bruce thought, is this Professor Gale when he was young? He made his image into a music box. Narcissistic. Then Bruce saw Professor Gale. He was leaning on a recliner, resting with his eyes closed, holding a hookah in his hand, surrounded by smoke. Bruce found that the other end of the hookah was connected to a skull. Is this something that a serious wizard can use? When Bruce approached, Professor Gale opened his eyes. When he saw the person coming, there was a subtle emotion in his eyes. Bruce believed it was disappointment. I remember, your name is Bruce Wayne. Professor Gale narrowed his eyes and said, are you Dumbledore's favorite student now? I'm not. Although he didn't know why Professor Gale suddenly asked this, Bruce still denied it frankly. Dumbledore's favorite student should be Harry Potter, he said. The boy who lived could make Snape less mean. Bruce doesn't think he has this kind of charm. Harry Potter. Professor Gale noted the name. Then, like a prophet, he stretched out his hand. Give me what Dumbledore asked you to hand over. Bruce took out the test tube and handed it to Professor Gale. As soon as the test tube was obtained, Professor Gale came to a conclusion. It's very interesting. It's magic that I've never seen before. He observed the thread of memory, and occasionally a trace of black air with green light appeared on it. This is not a known dark magic. You can tell Dumbledore that I need some time to study it. Good Professor. Now that the things have been delivered, Bruce has no reason to stay here. He turned around and was about to leave, when Professor Gale suddenly said behind him. I remember Gryffindor's dueling lesson, it's tomorrow, right? Yes. Bruce turned back and nodded in affirmation of Professor Gale's inquiry. Gryffindors and Hufflepuffs take this dueling class together. That's good, Professor Gale said with satisfaction. The next day, when Bruce walked into the duel classroom, many classmates were already standing there. Hermione waved to Bruce, motioning for him to come and stand with her. Neville was also beside him, holding his wand anxiously and nervous about the upcoming lessons. The duel classroom is different from ordinary classrooms. There are no desks here and it looks very empty. A wooden stage was set up in the middle, surrounded by many training dolls. Professor Gale made no sound when he came. When everyone found him, he was already standing on the stage. It seems you are ready. Professor Gale glanced at the little wizards below. Everyone already had their wands in their hands. He looked down at the crowd with his hands behind his back, as if he was giving a great speech. 2 months ago, your principal found me and hoped to open a course that can fully train your dueling skills. Gale said to the young wizards, after all, you also know that maybe soon, you will need to face a change in the wizarding world, or a war. By then, you must at least have some ability to protect yourself. He spoke without any restraint and did not shy away from mentioning the war in front of the students. The little wizards looked at each other with uneasiness on their faces. Dumbledore's original plan was that I could teach you some defensive methods, but I don't think that's possible. Gale took out his wand and could see that it was a very new wand. I always believe that the best defense is attack. Instead of constantly using defensive spells, it is better to defeat the enemy as quickly as possible. Next, I will teach you a spell that is suitable for your age. The inventor of this spell was a great magic genius. He once started a war and became a nightmare in the hearts of countless people. As soon as these words were said, the faces of the little wizards immediately showed fear. With such a description, could it be that person? It seems you have guessed who it is. A smile appeared on Gale's lips. Now, who can name this genius? Brush. Hermione immediately raised her hand. Miss Granger, tell me. Under Gale's encouraging eyes, Hermione took courage and said loudly, it's you-know-who, sir. Very creative answer. Gale smiled. 10 points from Gryffindor. Hermione was completely confused, and she even suspected that she had heard wrongly. Are you sure Professor Gale is talking about deductions, not bonus points? Hermione. Harry, who was standing on the other side, suddenly reminded in a low voice, Professor Gale asked for the name, and you said the mysterious person. It was then that Hermione realized what was happening. So that's it, did the professor mean for her to overcome her fear and speak out Voldemort's name bravely? It seems that I didn't understand this meaning, so the deduction of points is not unjust. Gale stood on the stage and glanced at the little wizards. Can anyone else answer this? Let me remind you once again that everyone should think about the word genius. He said, think carefully, who else can deserve the title of genius wizard besides Dumbledore? Harry looked around. No one raised their hands and seemed to be hesitating. It was still too difficult for them to say the name Voldemort. Looks like it has to be me. Harry thought that Dumbledore had once told him to always use the correct name for things. Fear of a name reinforces fear of the thing itself. Now is the time to lead by example yourself. Harry's eyes were firm and he raised his hand bravely. Seeing Harry raise his hand, Professor Gale was very satisfied. Harry Potter, I'm waiting for you to tell me that name. The genius who is as famous as Dumbledore. It's Voldemort, Harry said loudly, his eyes unwavering as he set an example for everyone. After the name came out, the scene fell silent for an instant. Including Professor Gale, all the follow-up words he originally prepared were suppressed by this name. Harry sensed something was wrong with the professor and asked tentatively, Professor, did I answer the question wrong? No, your answer is right, absolutely right. Gale said expressionlessly, Potter, please come to the stage. Under the watchful eyes of all his classmates, Harry walked to the other end of the duel stage and faced the professor. He looked a little overwhelmed and had no idea what was going on. Don't be nervous, Potter, it's just a demonstration, you can use your strongest spell on me now. Gale said coldly. Harry was immediately relieved, it turned out to be just a duel demonstration. He then held the wand tightly, and his mind was spinning rapidly, wondering what kind of lethal magic he had learned. But the harder he tried to think, the more his mind became like a ball of mush and he couldn't think of anything. It would be nice if Seamus came. He thought of his roommate, Seamus Finnegan, who had the gift of turning all spells into explosive spells. What are you still hesitating about, Potter? Gale said displeased, if you hesitate like this, you would be dead on the battlefield. There is no other way, just give it a try. Harry gritted his teeth and chanted the spell loudly. Except you. Gale suddenly took the lead and waved his wand. His wand flew out with a blinding red light, striking Harry. Harry suddenly became unsteady on his feet, flew into the air and spun around several times before falling heavily onto the duel stage. Stand up, Potter. Gale's tone was still cold, our demonstration is not over yet. The little wizards were silent. On Bruce's shoulder, Catum made sarcastic remarks. It seems that Gale Green was not very interested. He was angered by just one sentence. My evaluation is not as good as Voldemort. Owl Rui commented. Voldemort will not be led around by others. Professor Gale and Harry's duel demonstration continued. In other words, Gale was unilaterally teaching Harry a lesson. Harry flew into the sky again and then fell down like a kite with a broken string, pitiful and helpless. Even Catum can hardly stand it anymore. I suspect Gale never wanted to take teaching seriously. He didn't take this job to be a dueling teacher. He said to Bruce, he probably just likes to hit kids with hexes. Finally, with the distressed eyes of the little wizards, the duel demonstration ended. Harry's robes were messy, his hair was blowing up, and he had been severely punished. But what's surprising is that he didn't have a single scratch on his body. It seemed that Gale really just wanted to make Harry remember something, and had no real intention to hurt him. After the duel demonstration, Professor Gale felt refreshed. Actually, I was already very restrained when I started. He said, if you really meet a dark wizard, he will be 100 times more ruthless than me. Then Gale showed concern again and comforted Harry. It's okay, you've done well today. He patted Harry on the shoulder, but as Dumbledore's favorite student, you have to make more progress. Harry nodded weakly, having no idea when he had become the principal's favorite student. When Harry stepped off the duel stage, Gale resumed his speech appearance. What I just demonstrated to you is the spell created by the genius mage, and I named him Red Broom Star. The name of the creator is Gellert Grindelwald. I hope everyone will remember it deeply. The little wizards nodded repeatedly, indicating that they would definitely remember it. It's just that they don't understand why the spell created by Grindelwald was named by Professor Gale. Okay, now let's continue with class. Grindelwald, oh no, Professor Gale glanced below. Everyone must strive to master this spell within a month. The next week, a strange scene appeared in Hogwarts. All the little wizards have their wands in their hands at all times and are waving them constantly. Students can be seen practicing magic spells in the cafeteria, corridors, and even corners. Even during other classes, they put their hands under their desks and practice the Red Broom Star charm. Once in Professor McGonagall's Transfiguration class, a classmate suddenly succeeded in his experiment. The Red Broom Star was launched, knocking away the desk in front of him, and the fluttering parchment fell on Professor McGonagall's face. Then the classmate mentioned the 1-week confinement. The weekend is here in a blink of an eye. Bruce walked through the corridors and headed to the training room that Dumbledore had informed him about in advance. Then he saw Snape and Professor Gale in a corner, and they seemed to have a fierce argument. Bruce heard their conversation. You must apologize to him for this. Snape said, Harry is just a child. Do you know how much psychological damage it will cause to him if you make him embarrassed in front of so many students? This is just a demonstration, accidents are inevitable. Professor Gale's eyes were evil, and Snape, I must warn you, no one has ever dared to talk to me like this. Then it will be available today. Snape did not back down, I must seek justice for Harry. If you are unwilling to apologize, then we will go to Dumbledore to decide. Gale frowned when he heard Dumbledore's name. After a long time, he finally made a difficult concession. Just this once, Snape, just this once. Gale said coldly, I hope you can understand that I am not giving in because of your face. Seeing such a scene, Bruce didn't feel strange. Everyone in the school knew how much Snape favored Harry. He ignored the argument here and hurried to the training room. When they arrived at the training room, Dumbledore was already waiting there. Sorry, Mr. Principal, I'm late. It's okay, I just arrived. Dumbledore didn't care about this little thing and started today's training directly. The spell I'm about to demonstrate and teach you is a very advanced form of magic, Bruce. Dumbledore took out his wand and said, the Patronus charm is far beyond the level of an ordinary wizard. I don't know if you can learn it. Bruce nodded seriously and listened to the principal's explanation. A Patronus is a positive force. Bruce, get out your wand. Bruce took out the supreme wand and made preparations to cast a spell. The incantation of the Patronus charm is, call for guardianship. Dumbledore synchronized his movements with Bruce's. When you recite this spell, you must focus your thoughts at the same time and recall a particularly pleasant moment in your life, so that this spell will take effect. A particularly enjoyable moment. Bruce was suddenly stunned, his mind going blank at the moment. But Dumbledore didn't know his current situation and just said, now, follow my movements, call for divine protection. Bruce hurriedly shouted out the spell, call the gods to protect you. A loud phoenix cry came from the tip of Dumbledore's wand, and a silver phoenix flew out. But on Bruce's side, nothing happened. Just a ball of silver-white gas jumped out from the tip of the supreme wand, and then quickly disappeared. The spell failed. Dumbledore didn't expect this to happen. Bruce's magical talent was well known among teachers, and he could learn any spell in one go. But this time something unexpected happened. What happened, Bruce? Dumbledore said softly, is there something I didn't explain clearly? No, no. Bruce shook his head, a rare look of frustration appearing on his face. It's my problem, I can't think of any particularly happy memories. Dumbledore's heart twitched. He suddenly realized that he had been negligent. Bruce is an orphan. He grew up in loneliness. It is normal for him to have no happy memories. And indeed it is. When he was casting the spell just now, all Bruce could think of was the time he spent with his parents, and those were the memories he cherished. But no matter how pleasant those memories were at the time, when I think of my parents having left me, what was originally pleasure can turn into pain. I'm sorry, Bruce. Dumbledore apologized. It seems that now is not the time for you to learn the Patronus charm. Let's learn something else. Seeing Bruce's lonely look, Dumbledore felt a little guilty. At this moment, he wanted to apologize for his unwiseness just now. What to study? Bruce asked, looking up. The way he came out of his sadness in this moment made Dumbledore stunned for a moment. But he quickly adjusted and focused on his current teaching. What to study? Suddenly, he thought about how many teachers had recently reported to him that young wizards were practicing the Red Broom Star Curse. He knew what to teach next. Bruce, what do you think of the Red Broom Star that Professor Gale taught you? It's a very powerful spell, Bruce said. Then I will teach you a spell now that can directly make the Red Broom Star Curse ineffective. Dumbledore smiled and said, you can give Professor Gale a big surprise after you learn this spell. The Red Broom Star spell is essentially an attack spell improved from basic spellcasting. Dumbledore raised his hand, and a red light shot out from his wand, hitting the vase in the distance. The vase instantly turned into powder. The damage of the spell is determined by the wizard's own power, and the caster can also reduce the power through subjective will. The Red Broom Star spell is very fast to cast, and once you become proficient, you don't need a spell to activate it. It is a very convenient spell. Dumbledore paused for a moment, then said, back then, Grindelwald often used this spell to punish his men. Bruce nodded, and he understood why Professor Gale had hit Harry so many times before, but Harry was not hurt at all. It seemed that Professor Gale had minimized the power of the spell. Dumbledore continued. Grindelwald was very satisfied with the spell he developed and often showed it off. According to him, the opponent will never know how powerful this spell is until it actually hits him. Hearing this, before Bruce could say anything, the owl suddenly spoke. The fear of the unknown, that's what the Dark Lord likes to do. He said, but the Dark Lord after him obviously didn't do that well. It can be said that Grindelwald held the power of the verdict in his own hands and left room for slowdown. Then Voldemort would only use extreme methods. Peter Pettigrew is the perfect example. The owl couldn't help but think of a picture. Voldemort proudly said at the Death Eater meeting. I was heartbroken for those who didn't betray me back then, let alone those who betrayed me. Listen to the applause. Wait, this sentence seems to apply to Batman. I implanted viruses into all my teammates, let alone my enemies. Cadem was silent for a moment. Bruce was still listening to Dumbledore's explanation, unaware that Cadem was arranging him in his mind. Dumbledore finally got to the point. Bruce, what I want to teach you next is a defensive spell that I improved from the Curse of Standstill. The spell is... He raised his wand above his head and said the spell, Spellbounds. When this spell was uttered, an eggshell-like halo appeared around Dumbledore's body, visible to the naked eye. It only appeared for a moment and then quickly disappeared. This spell is not difficult to learn, but you have to control the timing. Dumbledore put away his wand and said, you can only bounce other people's spells back if you use them at the moment when the spell is about to hit you. By the way, the unforgivable curse cannot be rebounded. Bruce nodded, always confident in his ability to control timing. Then let's start studying, Dumbledore said softly. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the next duel class. In the duel classroom, each little wizard faced a practice puppet and continued to practice spells. Professor Gale walked among the students with his hands behind his back, as if he was reviewing his army. Harry, your movements are wrong. He corrected seriously, swing the wand faster. So fast that you can't even react. Harry bared his teeth, his arms were already sore. It was clear that Neville's movements around him were even more irregular, but Professor Gale turned a blind eye. Only for him. But Harry did not dare to directly refute the professor, so he could only press his almost unconscious arm, adjust his movements and continue practicing. Professor Gale left satisfied. I trained Harry strictly because I had higher expectations for him. Let's see what Snape has to say this time. Gale continued to look around, and then he saw Bruce, standing motionless in front of the puppet. Like fishing. Gale frowned. Bruce, he yelled, if you want to be lazy, just go home. Do you think Hogwarts is your home? Everyone looked over, with a trace of worry in their eyes. Bruce's expression remained unchanged and he said, No professor, I'm just thinking about a question. What's the problem? Gale asked. I was thinking, what should I do if someone uses the red broom star spell on me? Then use the magic spell faster than the opponent. Gale immediately gave the answer, there is no counter spell for the red broom star curse, you can only do this. Really? Bruce said, but Professor Dumbledore said. Nothing Dumbledore. Gale suddenly shouted, I don't want to hear any excuses from you now. Practice hard for me. Let me tell you the truth, if you fail to learn the magic spell in class, my salary will not be reduced by 1 canute. After that, he walked away, leaving Bruce with a vicious look. The little wizards around were stunned. Especially Hermione. She lowered her head and said to Bruce, You shouldn't talk to the professor like that. Even if the professor is a bit fierce, you can't use the name of the principal to suppress him. Bruce just shook his head. Don't worry, Hermione, I have a sense of discretion. His thoughts couldn't help but drift to when he came out of the principal's office a few days ago. Are you sure you want me to do this? Bruce walked on the moving stairs and asked Catum with some suspicion. Are you sure you want me to use Dumbledore's name to anger Professor Gale? Don't worry. The owl flapped its wings and flew beside Bruce, I have already planned it. Don't worry, Gale's reaction will definitely be very intense. So what if it's very intense? Bruce was still a little puzzled. Professor Gale is a teacher, and Dumbledore is the principal. Even if he reacts violently, he will just resign at most. Why should I do this? In his opinion, although Professor Gale is a little weird, the content of his teaching is real. Compared with Quirrell last semester and Lockhart this semester, he is so much better that he doesn't know where to go. With such a teacher, why should he force a conflict with him? Don't worry, it won't go to this extent. On the contrary, you will benefit from it. Catum patted his chest and promised. Believe me, I have read the book. Catum is very familiar with Yang Guo's story. What book? Bruce asked. Take it out and let me see it. Catum just shook his head. There are minotaurs, children should not read it. Time goes back to the present. The dual class ended in a solemn atmosphere, and Bruce did not see any reaction from Professor Gale in the end. The dead owl was lying again. Bruce was a little angry. He put away his wand and prepared to leave with the crowd. At this time, someone suddenly called him from behind. Looking back, it was Professor Gale. Bruce walked over and saw Professor Gale's eyes flickering. Dumbledore, what did I say to you before? Professor, it was my fault before. Bruce did not answer directly, but apologized to Professor Gale first. He shouldn't contradict the teacher in class. But Professor Gale didn't care about this at all. He just asked, what did Dumbledore say? What did he say about the red broom star curse? This. Bruce tried his best to say nice things, but now he felt that the owl was playing a prank. Deliberately provoking conflicts between myself and the professor. What a poisonous owl. Dumbledore said it was a very powerful spell, he added as best he could. You lied. Professor Gale's eyes were dark. Dumbledore wouldn't say that, he must have said something else. The principal also told me about the previous use of the red broom star curse. Bruce said, this spell was used by the Dark Lord to punish his subordinates. You are still hiding something from me. Gale saw right away that Bruce didn't tell the whole story. After thinking for a moment, he came up with the result. I see. He suddenly sneered. Did Dumbledore teach you any spells that can break the red broom star curse? This immediately hit the key point. Having said that, Bruce has nothing to hide. But he still tried to use euphemistic language and said, actually, Mr. Principal is not targeting the red broom star curse, he is talking about dealing with most spells. Okay, Wayne, you don't have to say anything. Professor Gale suddenly became expressionless. He sneered in his heart. If Dumbledore was specifically targeting the red broom star, he wouldn't say anything. But to deal with most spells, just throw in the red broom star. Gale couldn't accept this. In that case, he spoke in a longer tone and said to Bruce, just demonstrate it in front of me. I also want to see what advanced magic your principal has taught you. Is it right here? Bruce looked around. All the other students had left, and the entire classroom seemed empty. He couldn't help but think that if Professor Gale beat him up at this time, there would be no evidence left. Etc. He wouldn't have guessed right, would he? Bruce remembered the rumor that Owl had made before, that Professor Gale liked to beat children. Wayne, what are you still hesitating about? At this time, Professor Gale had already drawn out his wand. The duel has begun. A few decades ago, your opponent would not have waited for you to be ready. It was a few decades ago again. Bruce was helpless. This was almost Professor Gale's mantra. He would recall the past at every turn. I really don't know what good memories there are in this past. Didn't he start a world war? Bruce drew out the supreme wand. Now he had an arrow on the string and had to fire it. Seeing that Bruce was ready, Professor Gale also moved. Brush. He did not move forward or chant a spell. He just moved the tip of the wand slightly and the red broom star was launched. Red broom star arrived in front of Bruce in a blink of an eye. A smile appeared on the corner of Professor Gale's mouth. This is a magic he has used countless times and has never failed. He didn't believe that Dumbledore could solve it easily. This time, he used 10% of his power. It wouldn't hurt Bruce, but it would make him look bad. Just think of it as a little warning. The magic developed by Grindelwald is by no means inferior to Dumbledore. Then he saw Bruce raise his wand. The spell bounces back. As the words fell, an eggshell-like halo surrounded Bruce, and the red broom star hit just above the halo. In Professor Gale's widened eyes, the red broom star bounced back instantly. He didn't expect this situation at all, and could only watch as he was hit by the magic he emitted. Then, Professor Gale's body suddenly flipped high into the air, spinning several times in the air before landing. Cuckoo. Kadam flew in the sky, screaming happily. He just wanted to see this scene. Professor. Bruce quickly put away his wand and ran over to help Professor Gale up. On the way over, he slapped the owl, but unfortunately the owl was very wary and had already flown high into the sky. The old wizard was not injured, but his clothes were messy and he looked a little embarrassed. He pushed Bruce away. Dumbledore taught you this, the rebound spell. Gale tried to look like he didn't care about what had just happened. Okay, very good, he said. Professor, I didn't mean it. Bruce apologized to Gale. No, Gale stretched out his hand to stop Bruce's next words. I said you're very good, but you're really very good. This rebound spell is really good, it's completely beyond my expectation, hiss. Gale suddenly took a breath and covered his waist. It looks like it's twisted. Upon seeing this, Bruce wanted to step forward to help, but was stopped by Gale. Nothing happened to me, he said, I just pretended to have backache on purpose to give Dumbledore some face. Even so, he never took his hands off his waist, and his expression was still a little twisted. Okay, thank you Professor. Bruce didn't expose it, he just cooperated with Gale's performance. After waiting for a moment, Professor Gale finally took his hands off his waist and let out a sigh of relief. Let's get back to our previous topic. He quietly uncovered everything. We just talked about the rebound spell. It is indeed a very powerful magic, but it is a pity that Grindelwald had already thought of this trick and left a way to break it. What is it? Bruce asked curiously. How do I know? I'm not Grindelwald. Professor Gale glared. You have to give me some time to check the information. All right. Bruce nodded, thinking that was indeed the case. Today's development has exceeded his expectations. He did not expect that the principal's rebound spell would be so effective. Professor Gale was caught off guard and lost face. He would never tell anyone about this, Bruce thought. Unless Dumbledore comes to ask. Bruce was kicked out of the dual classroom, and Professor Gale said he wanted to look up information. The owl was still laughing crazily above his head, as if he was watching a big show. Bruce has no way to deal with Kadam's habit. He sighed and prepared to head to the hall to have lunch and attend his afternoon classes. Just as he walked not far away, suddenly, he heard a scream. The cry was no stranger to him. Harry Potter. Bruce and Kadam looked at each other and realized something was wrong, and they quickly ran towards the sound. Along the way, there were other students and teachers rushing there. When we got to the place, there were still many people there. There is a line of familiar words on the wall. There is no liberation for fools. Then a figure in black robes fell to the ground, and Harry fell on him, crying sharply. A second victim emerged. It's Snape. Chapter 91. Snape fell to the ground with a smile on his face. With his flowing black hair, he looked very peaceful. In his first year, Snape's hair was always greasy, and his classmates guessed that he might have some problem with shampoo. The most famous shampoo in the wizarding world is Potter. Later, Harry Potter became Snape's favorite student, and his prejudice against Potter's shampoo disappeared, and he even fell in love with washing his hair. But now Snape was lying on the ground, sleeping. He might not be able to wash his hair for a long time. Harry lay helplessly on Snape, sobbing, unwilling to accept this fact. A strong hand pulled Harry up. It was Hagrid who had just arrived. Hagrid held Harry in his arms and comforted him softly. It's okay, Harry, Dumbledore will wake him up. The other professors have also arrived. Dumbledore looked very solemn when he saw this scene. Snape is not a little wizard without the ability to protect himself. He can be cursed silently, which means that the problem is very serious. Hagrid, take Snape to the school hospital. Dumbledore said calmly. Don't worry, the school will solve this matter. The students who were watching were taken away, and Hagrid carried the sleeping Snape to Madame Pomfrey's ward. Hagrid was followed by professors, and the professors were followed by an owl. Bruce looked around and couldn't find K'tum. I don't know where he ran to. At this time, he was walking in the Hufflepuff team, and next to him was the Gryffindor team. Harry was still crying, and Hermione and Ron were comforting him. I'm so stupid, really. Harry sobbed. I should have listened to the house elf and not come to school this semester, so that the professor wouldn't be in trouble. From his tone, it seems that Snape has blocked the disaster for him. Bruce was interested in the house elves that Harry mentioned, and was about to ask Harry about it. At this moment, a voice appeared in his ears. It was the voice he had heard before. A man and a woman were talking happily, and this time, there was also a boy's laughter. They seemed very happy. The voice of the conversation was very familiar. Bruce swore that he had heard it before, but no matter how he thought about it, there was still a veil between him and the voice. It was so close, but he couldn't touch it. It seemed that he would never be able to reach the truth. At this moment, Hermione asked Harry, Harry, did you see anything? No, Harry said painfully. I just separated from him for a short while, and when we met again. He couldn't bear to say it anymore. But Hermione still wanted to get to the bottom of it. This was a very critical clue, related to finding the murderer. Did you hear anything? She said, when Snape was in danger. Harry tried to recall the scene at that time, and then he thought of. I seemed to hear the voices of a man and a woman, oh yes, and the laughter of a baby. Baby. Bruce was suddenly stunned. Is the voice Harry heard different from the one he heard? Snape was put on the bed, and Madame Pomfrey immediately checked his condition. Exactly the same, she concluded. It's the same condition as Miss Brown before, everything looks normal, but she just can't wake up. The scene was silent. This must be a very dark spell, it may be the ancient Imperious curse. At this time, Lockhart lowered his head and sighed, a spell more powerful than the Imperious curse, someone once used it on me, and I solved it. I happen to know how to deal with it. If I was there at the time, Snape should be fine. No professor paid attention to him. There was a hurried sound of footsteps outside the corridor, and then Professor Gale pushed open the door. When he saw Snape lying unconscious on the bed, his eyes darkened. Another case, and it happened in the castle, right? Gale said, it's the professor again this time. Dumbledore, do you have no control over your school? If you keep going like this, you will be fired by the board, and no one can help you then. Dumbledore's expression remained unchanged. He just said calmly, thank you for your concern, Professor Green. Gale shook his head and took out a test tube. It was the memory that Dumbledore had asked Bruce to study before. I'll give this back to you, I've already reached a conclusion. He said, this is not any of the currently known black magic, and there is no corresponding counterspell. Quote. Dumbledore nodded, and the test tube flew back to his hand. Now another glimmer of hope was shattered. 2 victims appeared, but they didn't even know what spell the other party was under. Now the atmosphere became very solemn, and except for Lockhart and Gale, the other professors had tense faces. Gale looked around and saw that Dumbledore had no intention of continuing to speak. He sighed and took the initiative to speak. In fact, I have more or less thought of a way that may work. Quote. Oh, Dumbledore's blue eyes looked at Gale Green through his half-moon glasses. Mr. Green, why didn't you tell me earlier? This is a great contribution. You didn't ask. Gale didn't want to argue anymore, so he got back to the point. I wonder if you have ever heard of the magic of mediumship. You mean the kind that gypsy witches often use? Dumbledore immediately thought, use special herbs and spices to build a spiritual environment and talk directly to the soul. Gale nodded. Yes, that's the method. He said, if you really can't find a way, just communicate with Snape's soul and ask face to face. Mr. Green, this method is very dangerous. Dumbledore said, Severus is not dead yet, and there are great risks in communicating with his soul. But at least this will give an explanation to the Ministry of Magic, proving that you, as the headmaster, have not done nothing. Professor Gale looked at Snape on the bed. Besides, I don't think Snape should mind these details. Victims will definitely continue to appear. At the critical moment, sacrificing Snape can save all other victims. Gale thinks it's worth it. Let's talk about this later. Dumbledore rejected the proposal after all. Gale did not insist, and the materials needed for the medium ritual were not ready yet. When they were ready, he would propose again. Unless some new turn of events appeared. An owl flew away silently by the window of the ward. Since Snape was attacked, the atmosphere in Hogwarts has been very low. Dumbledore was unwilling to accept Gale's proposal because he had his own ideas. These days, the messenger owls of Hogwarts have been working hard. Then, on the day when October was about to pass, the turn of events that Dumbledore was waiting for came. Godric Gryffindor, back. Gryffindor's return was a very secret matter. He did not attract anyone's attention. He appeared in the school late at night. As the night deepened, the little wizards had already fallen asleep. Catum was bored and was observing the night sky. He actually could not understand anything, but according to the intelligence, he had to stay awake at night in the next few days. Just then, my king, a little owl flew over with its wings flapping. What's the hurry? What did I teach you normally? Catum, the Owl King of Hogwarts Castle, shouted angrily. This little owl was Bubble, who was fortunate enough to be accepted as a younger brother by Catum. When he saw Catum's appearance, he immediately adjusted his state and stopped being anxious. Catum said with satisfaction, tell me, what happened? The man in Dumbledore's letter is back. Bubble said, what's his name, Gryffindor? Why didn't you say such an important thing earlier? Catum was furious and slapped Bubble away with one wing. Bubble felt wronged, but dared not say anything, and flapped his wings to leave. Wait, Catum suddenly stopped him. You did a good job this time. I will reward you with a big rat later. Ron's rat should be very suitable. Bubble smiled suddenly, and his grievances disappeared. He flew to Catum and wanted to get close to the king. Then he was kicked away by Catum. Bubble flew away with a happy mood, leaving Catum alone standing on the windowsill. During this period, Dumbledore's movements have been followed by Catum. He has been sending letters to someone, thinking that he is secretive, but he has no idea that all the owls in Hogwarts have become Catum's subordinates. The person Dumbledore asked for help was Gryffindor, who had been missing for a long time. Now, Gryffindor is finally back. Bruce was pushed awake from his sleep, and looked at the owl beside his pillow with sleepy eyes. He was still a little confused. Very good, it seems that you are not asleep either. Catum said, hurry up and get dressed, I will take you to see something that you can't see during the day. What is this? Bruce didn't understand what Catum meant at all. He just put on his clothes in a daze, instinctively stopped his footsteps, and followed Catum out of the dormitory. Catum cast the disillusionment charm, and Bruce and him became invisible. This kind of spell should not be hidden from the eyes of Dumbledore and Gryffindor. Catum slapped Bruce twice to make him no longer confused. So you should be more vigilant. If you are discovered, I will leave you and run away without hesitation. Bruce's head was buzzing, and he finally woke up. Did you hit me? He covered his face and asked belatedly. No, you had a nightmare. Catum said casually, okay, don't just stand there, come with me. The effect of the disillusionment charm cast by the owl was much better than he said. At least Bruce passed several ghosts and Mr. Filch on patrol along the way. None of them found his trace. The owl took him on an unusual path, directly outside the castle, and climbed on the wall. Bruce suddenly realized where he was going. You want to take me to the principal's office? He looked at the window in the distance where the light was still on. Why is Dumbledore still awake? Keep your voice down, Bruce, this is a test for you. Kadam flew silently in the air. If you are caught eavesdropping for the first time, I will laugh at you for the rest of my life. You. Bruce suddenly heard the owl say this, and his heart was full of anger. He didn't make any preparations. But since he was here, he couldn't turn back. There was no way. Bruce could only hold his breath as much as possible, and under the blessing of the disillusionment and levitation spells, he slowly moved to the bottom of the window. Then he heard the conversation in the office. Are you recovering well? This was Dumbledore's voice. No problem, don't worry. Bruce remembered that this voice belonged to Godric Gryffindor. Now the headmaster and Gryffindor are talking. He finally realized how confidential the content he was eavesdropping on was. It was indeed something that could not be seen or heard during the day. Bruce put his ear against the wall, stopped talking, and listened carefully to the conversation inside. Slytherin's current madness is more extreme than I thought. This was Gryffindor talking. He almost didn't hold back at all. If I wasn't lucky, I wouldn't be able to come back. You are too modest. Dumbledore smiled. Bruce couldn't see Gryffindor's appearance now, but based on the heavy breathing when he spoke, he could also judge that Gryffindor should be injured. It was left when he fought with Salazar Slytherin. Bruce listened quietly, and soon he got the point. Except for Salazar, I have talked to the other two people. Gryffindor said. After Jason died, Helga and Rowena's self-awareness gradually returned and they could communicate. Helga and I have reached an agreement. She has no interest in what Salazar is going to do and is willing to remain neutral. Just remain neutral. Dumbledore's voice was a little disappointed. Wouldn't Hufflepuff be willing to protect the school she founded? Albus, that's enough. Gryffindor sighed. You should know that the current Hogwarts does not satisfy us very much. Dumbledore did not speak. Well, this is not your problem, it's the problem of the magic world, hiss. Gryffindor took a breath, as if his wound suddenly broke out. He paused for a moment before continuing. As for Rowena, unfortunately, I did not succeed in negotiating with her. After returning to the world, she has a new goal. What goal? Dumbledore asked. Gryffindor did not answer directly, but continued to speak along his own train of thought. After Rowena was resurrected, she heard a very interesting story. A powerless baby was able to survive the Avada Kedavra curse and even completed the counterattack. Dumbledore, what do you think is the reason? This question was not a problem for Dumbledore, and he quickly gave an answer, because of love. Yes, Rowena thinks so too. Gryffindor suddenly said, but you should know what Rowena experienced in the last stage of her life. The betrayal of her daughter dealt the most ruthless blow to her who was seriously ill. Rowena loved her daughter, but was betrayed by the person she loved. She was so unfortunate because of the love in her heart. Now after resurrection, she was told that love is the most powerful magic and the most precious thing. She seems to have other ideas about this. Dumbledore seemed to guess something. You mean? That's right, Gryffindor said. I suspect Ravenclaw is wrong to prove the magic of love. Bruce returned to the dormitory worriedly, still thinking about the conversation in the principal's room just now. He knew that the story Gryffindor had told was about Harry Potter, the only person to survive Avada Kedavra. According to Dumbledore, it was his mother's love that saved him. Now Ravenclaw wants to prove love magic wrong. How to prove it? Use Avada Kedavra on Harry again. Bruce is hard to say. Kadam stopped on his shoulder, fighting spirit high. Away, it's time for us to take action. The owl said aggressively. Before Ravenclaw takes action, let's use the killing curse on Harry first and make her miss. You're a little too extreme. Bruce shook his head and said, Ravenclaw shouldn't be as crazy as you. He seemed to have completely forgotten that he had just raised this conjecture. According to Gryffindor, Ravenclaw herself is now missing, and the Chamber of Secrets opened in Hogwarts represents her will. Where do you think Ravenclaw can go? Bruce thought, Gryffindor said that her power is not complete now because she lost her noble phantasm. As expected, Ravenclaw should be busy getting his noble phantasm back now. Kadam, what do you think her noble phantasm will be? I have no idea. Kadam shook his head and took out the crown of wisdom from the feathers. As soon as his wings touched, the crown immediately changed its shape, from the previous rusty crown to a ring of thorns. The owl places the crown of thorns on its head. Is it suitable for me? It looks a bit weird. Bruce said casually, it just so happens that you are wearing the crown of wisdom, so help me think about what Ravenclaw's noble phantasm might be. With the clues to the noble phantasm, we might be able to find Ravenclaw himself. It's time for dueling class again. Perhaps because of the haze surrounding the professor's accident, the overall enthusiasm of the young wizards in attending classes is not very high. Bruce cast a spell on the training dummy, Hermione beside him. The two men exchanged information in low voices. Malfoy's father has been to the school several times. He is the governor of Hogwarts. Hermione whispered, according to what Malfoy usually boasts about, the school board is very dissatisfied with Dumbledore's performance, and now parents also have strong opinions. Bruce shrugged it off. It's just a means of putting pressure. No one can replace Dumbledore now. He said, if Dumbledore is replaced, Hogwarts will have to close. I think the school board is even more reluctant to see this situation. Hermione nodded. Indeed, she didn't actually feel much nervousness, because Hermione didn't fit the criteria of a victim from any angle. Unlike Neville, I heard from the boys that recently he wanted to turn a blind eye while sleeping. I'm afraid that if I fall asleep one day, I'll never wake up again. After all, there is no liberation for fools. Don't worry, Hermione, Hogwarts can survive just as it has for the past 1,000 years. Bruce thought for a while and said, maybe we should think more about next school year now. He was referring to matters regarding course selection for the school year. During the Easter holidays, little wizards submit their wishes for elective courses for the next school year. Hermione said without any hesitation, I have already thought about it. I have to choose all the subjects. But some class times conflict. How do you solve this problem? Bruce asked. Don't worry, I asked Professor McGonagall and she said there is a way to solve it. Hermione hesitated for a moment and decided to remind Bruce, I can't tell you the specific details, but if you also want to take a few classes, don't worry about the class schedule. Really? Bruce was a little moved. Kadam on the other side heard this conversation and of course knew what Professor McGonagall was talking about. Time converter. Magic involving time. Now there are more things to consider. Al thought in his mind that if Bruce were to encounter something related to time, given his personality, he would definitely have to study it in depth to master it. There is an inexplicable law in the universe. For example, if a person has the ability to heal himself, he will definitely be beaten the hardest and die the most times. And if Bruce has the ability to change the past, reality will definitely be a little messy. Maybe people will die at Hogwarts next school year. Forget it, it's a blessing in disguise. Kadam thought to himself that maybe when he gets the time turner, he can master some time magic. After the dueling class, Professor Gale kept Bruce behind. He had such a fierce look on his face that the other little wizards didn't dare to stay for a moment. Hermione was also very worried, thinking that she and Bruce had been discovered deserting from class. After the others left, Professor Gale spoke. Wayne, I just found relevant information recently. He said, I roughly know what happened to Grindelwald's method of breaking the rebound curse. So, let's try it again. I'll use the red broom star curse to attack you, and you'll have to defend yourself. Professor Gale wants to show it now. But Bruce shook his head. Professor, I'm not a fool. He looked at Professor Gale with a look that looked like a fool. Since you have found a way to crack it, why should I rush to get beaten? Well, Professor Gale choked for a moment. Now it's like he said to Bruce, do you believe I can defeat Dumbledore? The normal development should be that Bruce says he doesn't believe it, and then Gale can show off his methods. But Bruce said he believed it. This made Gale feel uncomfortable all over. You can't do this, Bruce. Gale racked his brains to think of an excuse. This is a spell that Dumbledore taught you specifically. Don't you want to prove that it can't be broken? No, Professor. Bruce said calmly, the power of the spell depends on the caster. Even if I fail, it does not prove that Professor Dumbledore's spell is not effective. These words finally broke Gale's guard. He had lost so much face before, and now he finally made a comeback, but Bruce didn't want to give him a chance. No way. He grabbed the wand and drew it out, and fired the red broom spell. Bruce sighed secretly. Why did Professor Gale feel more naive than his 12-year-old self? The spell bounces back. Finally, Bruce raised his wand, and an eggshell-like halo enveloped him. Just then, the red light that was supposed to hit the rebound shield suddenly disappeared. This was fake. Immediately afterwards, another red broom star appeared in the sky. It has always been there, it was just invisible before. At this time, the rebound shield had disappeared, and the red light was about to hit Bruce. Bruce turned around to hide, but saw that the second red broom star also disappeared. Ha 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 ha, how about it? It will open your eyes. Gale was in an extremely happy mood and laughed loudly. Actually, from the moment you saw me pulling out the wand, your vision was distorted. The red broom star after that was just what I wanted you to see. I named this spell the Void Illusion Curse. Bruce, I'll teach you this spell, and you go and let Dumbledore open his eyes. Using illusions to make Bruce miss the opportunity to rebound is undoubtedly a very effective method. This spell is quite interesting. The owl flew to Bruce's shoulder. The power is increased tenfold. I'm afraid it can completely control the 5 senses. Completely dominate the 5 senses. The more I listen to it, the less it sounds like a spell that good people can use. Bruce thought to himself, just to break a rebound spell, does it need to go to this extent? Professor Gale is very happy now. He feels that he has easily proved that Grindelwald is stronger than Dumbledore. Bruce was pulled by him to learn spells. Even if he just knew it, he had to be proficient enough to master it. Gale didn't want to ruin his reputation because of Bruce's mistake. Half an hour later, Professor Gale's extra lecture ended. Bruce learned the illusion spell and successfully created an illusion that satisfied him. Bruce, remember to train your imagination more in the future. Professor Gale gently reminded, only if your imagination is rich enough, you can construct a more realistic illusion. Bruce nodded, indicating that he remembered. Originally, after the class ended, according to Professor Gale's habit, Bruce should be kicked out of the classroom immediately. But this time, he did not do so. He seemed a little hesitant, as if he had something to say. Bruce, he finally spoke, I want to ask you to do me a small favor. I don't know if it's inconvenient for you. Professor, tell me. Bruce had nothing to hesitate about. Professor Gale taught him magic, so he should do a little favor. But it's better to just be a small favor. That's right. As you know, there have been 2 accidents in the school now. Professor Gale said slowly, now people inside and outside the school are very uneasy about this. I have thought of a good way, which may have some effect, but your principal does not agree. Then he told Bruce about the medium's magic and the reasons for Dumbledore's objection. After all, he is still too soft-hearted. The safety of so many students in the school is more important than one professor. Gale sighed. At such a critical time, the principal should show more courage. The more Bruce heard, the more something was wrong. When Gale said this, he didn't want to be the principal, right? That won't work. As the day goes by, Bruce only has Dumbledore as the principal in his heart. Unless, fortunately, Gale didn't mean this, and Bruce didn't need to continue thinking about it. I really want to stick to my idea, but Dumbledore is the principal after all. After much thought, I came up with a compromise. Professor Gale raised his hand, and a diary flew into his hand. Since we can't channel Snape's soul into reality, let's just reverse channel it and send a soul into his dream. Bruce admitted that the idea was interesting. Gale handed him the diary. I already had a quarrel with Dumbledore before, and now I suddenly propose such a plan. It seems like I am admitting my mistake. Gale said, so Bruce, I hope you can do me a little favor. Just tell me that you picked up this diary. Dumbledore should be able to figure out what to do next. Bruce really didn't expect things to develop like this. He looked at the diary in his hand and could vaguely feel that there was dark magic flowing in the diary. This diary was originally a Horcrux, hiding an evil soul. Gale explained, but it doesn't matter. I have solved all the black magic above, and I have also trained the soul inside. He will be obedient. Black magic, all solved. He stared at Gale with suspicious eyes. Professor, there is clearly residual black magic in this diary. I did it on purpose. Gale waved his hand and said indifferently, only by retaining part of the original dark magic can Dumbledore believe that this Horcrux was not made by me. That's okay. Bruce believed this statement. After all, the dark magic in the diary was indeed very weak and posed no threat to him. He put away his diary and prepared to leave. At this time, Professor Gale gave his final advice. Bruce, if you don't mind, you can chat with the soul inside. He thought for a while and said, that soul is quite interesting. Bruce left the dueling classroom. He was walking on the way to the canteen and talked to Kadam. Kadam, I suddenly have a guess. He recalled the conversation in the classroom just now. I think Professor Gale might have been a famous dark wizard when he was young. Being so familiar with all kinds of black magic, it's hard not to be suspicious. Wow, what you said does make sense. Owl echoed emotionlessly, I really didn't expect that at all. Kadam recently read a book on parenting, which said that you should be a parent who does not disappoint. That should be it. Bruce heard the owl's strangeness and suddenly lost interest in continuing. One person and one bird fell silent. Then, as they passed Professor Flitwick's office, they saw a little witch and a ghost standing in the corridor talking. Bruce vaguely remembered that this little witch was a first-year Ravenclaw student named Ravenna. And the ghost next to her is the ghost of Ravenclaw, Lady Grey. So that's it. Ravenna smiled at Ms. Grey and said, then I will go look for it later. Thank you, Ms. Grey. She said goodbye to Ms. Grey and turned to leave, passing Bruce. Kadam's eyes followed Ravenna until she was completely out of sight. Interesting, Owl murmured, what is she doing on the 5th floor? There is nothing on the 5th floor of Hogwarts Castle, only the restricted book area, abandoned classrooms and bathrooms. Is Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets there? What are you looking at? Bruce's voice suddenly came, and he directly exposed Kadam's crime. The dead owl doesn't learn well and secretly looks at other people's little witches. Nonsense, it's the nature of an owl to keep an eye on people without any purpose. Kadam said directly, I think there may be some hidden area on the 5th floor of Hogwarts. How about we explore it at night? Not today. Bruce shook his head, he did have something to do tonight. He was going to talk to the fun soul that Professor Gale said and see how fun it was. The night is getting darker. Bruce sat on the bed, flipping through the diary. The pages inside were all blank, without any trace of ink. Only on the first page could one make out a name written in faint ink, T.M. Riddle. This is the original owner of the diary. What is the name of the soul inside? He doesn't look like a serious person. Bruce took out a bottle of ink, dipped his quill in it, and let a drop of ink fall on the first page of the diary. The ink shone brightly on the paper for a second, then seemed to be sucked into the paper and disappeared without a trace. Bruce dipped his quill in ink again and wrote, My name is Bruce Wayne. This line of text flashed on the paper and was sucked in, leaving no trace at all. After Bruce waited for a while, words he had never written seeped out of the paper, forming a paragraph. But there is something wrong with this passage no matter how you look at it. Master Green, please stop testing me. For a moment, Bruce didn't know how to answer. He remembered what Professor Gale said before, that there was a very interesting soul in the diary. But now it seems, what did Professor Gale do to this soul to make him fear like this? Even Bruce felt a little sorry for this guy. He wrote in his diary, I am not Lord Green, I picked up this diary. The diary didn't answer, as if he didn't believe Bruce's words at all. It's true, I didn't lie to you. Bruce thought for a moment and tried to appear innocent and harmless. The Lord Green you are talking about, do you mean Professor Gale Green? He is really fierce, and none of our classmates like him. After a moment of silence in the diary, a paragraph finally slowly emerged. Last time you said you were a first-year female student at Hogwarts, pretending to be open to me, and tricked me into absorbing your soul. What happened? Do you think I forgot? I won't make the same mistake a second time. This, although it was just a simple text, Bruce could see endless resentment. This soul of black magic has been fished and enforced by Professor Gale countless times. What kind of ultimate humiliation did he go through to achieve his current life experience? No one can understand it. Bruce couldn't think of how to continue the conversation. At this time, Kadam jumped on the bed and stood next to the diary. He used telepathy and whispered to Bruce. Talk to him about the boy who lived, I think he'll be very interested. Talk to the diary about Harry. Bruce was a little confused. According to the faded date on the cover of the diary, it was easy to tell that this was a diary from 50 years ago. 50 years ago, Harry's father wasn't even born at that time. But now the progress bar can't move anyway, so Bruce simply becomes a doctor and listens to Kadam. I'm really not Professor Green, I'm just an introverted boy who is not good at words. He wrote in his diary, I am very lonely in this school. No one has ever wanted to play with me. I can only talk to owls every day. I saw T.M. Riddle's name written on the diary. Is your name Riddle? Riddle, can you be my friend and listen to what's on my mind? There was no answer in the diary. Bruce waited for a moment and continued to write in it. The person I hate the most is Harry Potter from Gryffindor House. Everyone loved him, everyone was around him, he was as bright as the sun. I'm like a gutter rat compared to him. I hate him so much. Didn't that Scarhead defeat Voldemort when he was a child? I don't believe he did it on his own. Bruce became more and more excited as he wrote. He didn't know why, but his thoughts flowed very smoothly when he wrote these words. Just like such a person really exists in reality. Kadam looked at the words and suddenly asked, why did you write yourself as Malfoy? Ah, Bruce wakes up from a dream. He said that this description became more and more familiar the more he read it. Congratulations Bruce, you finally mastered the essence of lying. Kadam laughed and said, 9 truths and 1 falsehood, Merlin won't be able to tell the truth even if he comes. Bruce didn't know what was so funny. He felt that he had taken the topic off topic and the diary might not pay attention to him anymore. Who would want to be friends with Malfoy? However, things turned out unexpectedly. In the diary, the paragraph that Bruce originally wrote, victory over Voldemort, was highlighted. A line of words slowly appeared. Elaborate. The answer actually changed. Bruce's eyes sharpened. No matter what the topic was just now, Riddle always looked like he was dying. But now the news that Voldemort was defeated gave him a new answer. This can only prove one thing. Riddle's interest in Voldemort's defeat surpassed his fear of Professor Gale. Why? A suspicion emerged in Bruce's mind. 50 years ago. Bruce began to count the time. When did Voldemort become famous? According to the history of magic, it was probably in the 1970s that the Dark Lord's power reached its peak, and he himself was in his prime. If you calculate it this way, the time is right. Kadam. Bruce asked in his mind, could this riddle be Voldemort? You reasoned pretty quickly this time. The owl did not hide anything, it is indeed him. His full name is Tom Marvolo Riddle. You can get the answer by rearranging the alphabetical order. Bruce thought for a moment. Tom Marvolo Riddle. I am Lord Voldemort. At this moment, Bruce didn't feel any fear, he was not afraid of Voldemort in the first place. But a very strange idea came to my mind. Half-Blood Prince Snape, Lord Voldemort Tom. Why do they all like to have such names? Bruce asked Kadam, don't you feel ashamed? How can you be ashamed? The owl flapped its wings, I am also King Kadam. For the first time in his life, Bruce felt deeply that he did not fit in with others. What kind of people are around me? In front of these guys, the name Batman seems ordinary. On the other side, the diary was obviously getting impatient because he had not received a response for a while. For the first time, he took the initiative to stir up the topic. What happened, my dear Bruce? Why don't you answer my question? Riddle asked, aren't we already good friends? He was now eager to get more information from Bruce. As the soul of Voldemort's 6th grade, he is full of confidence in himself and firmly believes that he can achieve great things. But now he suddenly heard that his future self was defeated by a baby, and the specific details were unclear. How could he not be anxious? Riddle, are you interested in Voldemort? Bruce wrote in his diary, you think Harry Potter is amazing too. Riddle heard something else in the words. He began to accept the persona of Bruce, a sensitive little boy, and he always knew how to get along with such a person. Of course not, my dear Bruce. Riddle said, although I am just a diary, I have also heard of Voldemort. He is a very powerful wizard. How could such a person be defeated by a baby? There must be something hidden in this. This Harry Potter is probably a deceitful person. Come on, Bruce, tell me more details, and I will work with you to find the loopholes and expose Potter's true face. What he said was emotional and logical, as if he was completely standing in Bruce's shoes and thinking for him. I'll tell you, Riddle. Bruce wrote in his diary, I'll tell you everything I know. After about an hour, Bruce closed the diary. Through telepathy, he and Kadam conspired in front of Voldemort. This guy is really full of flattery. I can't stand it anymore. Bruce sighed. If I were really just an ordinary student, I'd probably already regard him as a confidant. Some of Voldemort's words were simply too disgusting. For example, when he praised Bruce, he could even say, "You are destined to be the best among people, and I am just a humble piece of dust on the roadside. It is the greatest luck in my life to be able to stick to the edge of your shoes and accompany you for a while." Such words. Who can control this? You have to learn this kind of thing more often, Kadam said, and tell me about it later. You're dreaming. Bruce returned to the topic. Professor Gale must have discovered Voldemort's identity, right? Then why is he so ambitious and dares to give the diary to a student? He even had to channel Voldemort's soul into Snape's dream. Is this a plan that normal people can think of? Is Professor Gale really not afraid that when Snape wakes up, his soul will be replaced by Voldemort? Bruce sighed. What to do now? Gale simply had the idea as soon as he hit his head. Dumbledore would never agree to let Voldemort enter Snape's body. Don't be so gloomy. It's not a big problem actually. Kadam thought for a while and gave a solution. It's okay to channel, but it doesn't need to be reversed. It's just a link using the diary. What do you mean? Bruce asked. Voldemort's diary can absorb the souls of others to strengthen itself. Kadam explained. This is actually the ability to connect souls, and in that case, let's connect it to Snape. At that time, everything Snape thinks will appear in the diary, and the words written in the diary can also be conveyed to Snape's mind. Although the process is still risky, with Dumbledore and Professor Gale watching, there shouldn't be any big problems. Bruce understood what the owl meant. It means that Voldemort is not allowed to directly enter Snape's dream, but the diary is used as a medium to communicate with the sleeping Snape. In this way, Voldemort's soul is still in the diary and will not directly harm Snape. This is indeed a good idea. But, wait, why are you so kind this time? Bruce suddenly realized that Kadam was really thinking of a solution this time. This made him feel that something was wrong. Bruce, it breaks my heart to hear you say that. Kadam pretended to cry twice. Although I am a devil, I also have a heart to save people. I am a good owl. What bad intentions could an owl have? But Bruce didn't buy it at all. He said, don't do this. Even if you want to trick someone, you don't need to hide it from me, right? Unless you want to trick me. Then you are thinking too much. The owl put away its fake crying face and said, I just let Snape's dream be broadcast live. Live streaming Snape's dream. At this moment, Bruce just wanted to ask Kadam one question. What happened to you, Snape, that you deserve to be so targeted? The same was true for the previous compound potion, and the same is true for the current dream live broadcast. Ever since the owl came to Hogwarts, Snape couldn't go back to his old life. Don't look at me like that. Kadam noticed Bruce's expression. Maybe in the end, Snape will have to thank me. Over the weekend, Bruce heads to Dumbledore's teaching location. This time he took on 2 tasks entrusted by Professor Gale. One was to demonstrate the power of the Phantom spell, and the other was to propose a diary channeling plan. Dumbledore's habit seemed to be to arrive early every time. When Bruce entered the classroom, Dumbledore was looking at him with a smile. Sorry, Professor, I'm late again this time. Bruce sighed and apologized to Mr. Principal. He was already half an hour early this time, but Dumbledore still arrived earlier than him. No need to apologize, Bruce. Dumbledore said kindly, you have come very early. I was playing a trick. I know, Bruce said to himself. He had already discovered that there was a portrait of the former principal hanging in the corridor leading to this classroom. The same portrait is also found in the principal's office. The reason why Dumbledore can come early every time is actually not a secret. It is nothing more than reporting the message through the portrait and then apparating. After all, in Hogwarts, only the headmaster has the privilege of apparating. The old man is quite nice. Then let's start today's lesson. Dumbledore looked at Bruce. I also want to know what method Professor Gale thought of to break the rebound spell. He knows everything. In other words, he guessed everything. I guessed that after suffering a loss, Gale would not give up and would definitely find a way to prove himself. Show me, Bruce, said Dumbledore. No need to hold anything back. Just cast the spell on me. There are only a few people in the wizarding world who can draw a wand and cast a spell in front of Dumbledore openly. Bruce pulled out his wand, and in the process, the void spell was activated. This is Professor Gale's little thought. When he designed the void illusion spell, he adopted a brand new design idea. This magic is not triggered through spells, but through specific actions. For example, he himself is set to pull out the wand. Anyone who sees this action will enter into a fantasy hallucination. Bruce, of course, choreographed his own moves. Professor, I'll take the first shot. Bruce waved his wand and the red broom star was launched. He simply replicated Professor Gale's previous actions, causing Dumbledore's vision to be distorted. The first red broom star is fake, it is really hidden behind. Bruce wanted to see how Dumbledore would handle it if he faced the same situation as himself. Soon, he saw. Dumbledore did nothing, but when the red broom star was about to hit him, his entire figure disappeared from the place. Now that the target has been lost, the red broom star hidden behind has naturally failed. As for Dumbledore himself, he appeared behind Bruce, still with a faint smile on his face, calm and calm. Professor, you are being a bit cheating. Bruce protested, no one else can disapparate in Hogwarts. And this kind of response is too uncreative. Professor Gale would probably disagree. Yeah, hearing Bruce's protest, Dumbledore's smile grew wider. What if I said that what I just used was not apparition? Not apparition, but Bruce just saw Dumbledore disappear from where he was. Bruce, I will explain it to you later, but our duel is not over yet. Dumbledore said softly, since Professor Gale taught you such a clever magic spell, you should have follow-up methods. Okay, although Bruce didn't know how Dumbledore discovered that he was using magic related to illusions. But he put his doubts aside for the time being and continued to focus on this duel. Dumbledore waved his wand at this time, and the armor in the classroom seemed to have come to life. One by one, they jumped off the exhibition stand and rushed towards Bruce. This is the picture in the principal's eyes. In Bruce's eyes, what Dumbledore manipulated was actually just a few portraits. This was an illusion created by the void illusion spell, which made Dumbledore see the portrait as armor. What he thought was an effective attack actually had no lethality. Bruce planned to use this deviation to carry out an effective attack. However, the accident happened at this moment. Just when those portraits floated to Bruce's side, their appearance suddenly changed, and they really turned into a pair of armor, like a soldier, raising their weapons high and slashing at Bruce. Bruce's eyes were opened this time. It was obvious that he was the one who created the illusion, but at some point, the illusion became reality. That's it. At the moment when Bruce was really about to be attacked, Dumbledore shouted stop. The armors all stopped in place, and then their shapes changed again, turning into their original portraits, and fell to the ground one after another. Transfiguration. Bruce lifted the illusion spell. He already knew what had just happened. The reason why the portrait turned into armor was because of Dumbledore's transfiguration. You're smart, Bruce. Dumbledore came closer, opened his palm, and placed a crumpled candy wrapper in his palm. What is this? Bruce asked. The secret of my teleportation just now. Dumbledore said with a smile, this is a portkey. Portkey, a magical item that teleports anyone who touches it to a designated location. When Dumbledore was attacked just now, he casually transformed the candy wrapper in his pocket into a door key, and then teleported it behind Bruce. Portkeys are not banned at Hogwarts, Dumbledore said, so I didn't use the principal's privileges just now. This is Dumbledore's usual method. He grabbed an ordinary object and twisted it into a door key. Bruce asked, what about hallucinations? How did you find out that you were in a hallucination? Well, Dumbledore thought for a long time before he thought of what to say. Bruce, when Professor Gale taught you this magic, did he ask you to use your imagination to create more realistic illusions? Bruce nodded. This Gale did say it. That's it. Dumbledore patted Bruce on the shoulder, come on. After that, he changed the topic smoothly without giving Bruce any reaction. In fact, I have always felt that although illusion is powerful, reality is even more powerful. Dumbledore picked up a portrait and said, "Just like this painting, you made me think it was armor. I don't need to expose it, I just turn it into armor. And it's not just armor." As he finished speaking, the portrait in his hand suddenly changed and turned into a silver sword. Dumbledore pulled out a piece of his hair, put it on the blade of his sword and blew on it, causing the hair to break into two pieces. Immediately afterwards, the silver sword changed back into a portrait again. Bruce saw all this and his heart surged. In past Transfiguration classes, Professor McGonagall always asked students to turn mice into snuff boxes or beetles into buttons. Although Bruce found it magical, he always felt that transformation was just a means of control. But now after Dumbledore showed it, the meaning of transfiguration in Bruce's eyes was completely different. How could this kind of spell be used only for control in battle? If you can master the art of transformation, you can have endless weapons in battle. Imagine that in the ruins of a battlefield, Bruce waved his hand, and rubble flew up all over the sky, and then the rubble turned into thousands of swords, densely suspended behind him. What kind of scene is that? Bruce gets excited just thinking about it. And what if instead of turning the rubble into a sword, he turned it into a nuclear bomb? Bruce's expression suddenly became more serious than ever. "Professor, I want to learn to transform." "It seems that you have noticed the charm of transfiguration." Dumbledore smiled, "But transfiguration is a very profound knowledge, and you need to spend a lot of energy on it." "No problem." Bruce's eyes were firm, and at this moment, he had already made his goal clear. That is to become a master of transfiguration. As for Professor Gale, so unfamiliar. This time the teaching time ended with Bruce still having more to say. Dumbledore was very happy to see students working hard to learn magic, which was also the meaning of his devotion to education. After the Transfiguration course, Bruce thought of his second mission. He took out Voldemort's diary from a pile of textbooks, followed Gale's previous explanation, and said to Dumbledore, "Professor, I have something to tell you." "What's up?" Dumbledore looked at the diary in Bruce's hand and noticed the flow of dark magic in it. Bruce said, "This is a diary that I accidentally picked up before. This diary can talk to me. There seems to be a soul in it." Dumbledore said in a cautious tone, "Soul? Bruce, don't make such a judgment easily. Magic items that can talk and converse are common and not complicated to make. Such as those portraits in the castle. But when it comes to things like the soul, that's unusual." What Dumbledore could immediately think of was Horcruxes. One of the most evil magic props, it requires killing someone to make it. "I'm pretty sure there's a soul in there." Bruce vowed, "That soul has been saying bad things about Harry to me and trying to sow discord between me and Harry. It's very hateful. Oh, by the way, he has a name." "Really? What's his name?" Dumbledore thought that if he could know the name of this diary, he might be able to trace its original owner. According to the black magic above, his master is most likely a dark wizard. "Wait, isn't it Grindelwald's?" Dumbledore's expression suddenly felt strange. He had never heard of Grindelwald having the habit of writing a diary. What could he have in his diary? At this time, Bruce said the name of the soul in the diary word by word. He said his name was Tom Marvolo Riddle. Dumbledore's face froze for a moment. He asked in disbelief, "What did he say his name was?" "Tom Marvolo Riddle." Bruce repeated Voldemort's name again, and there was a faint tendency to complain in his words. "This spirit is really hateful and keeps saying bad things about Harry. As you know, Headmaster, Harry has always been a good brother to me. Not only that, he also encouraged me to do some very evil things, things that are so evil that I can't even say them out loud." At this time, Dumbledore's expression could no longer be described as serious. Bruce swore that this was the first time he saw murderous intent on the old principal's face. Of course, Dumbledore murmured, "Of course this is what he can say and do." He held out his hand, motioning for Bruce to give him the diary. His other hand was holding the wand tightly, obviously preparing to give Voldemort in the diary some back-to-school care from the principal. But contrary to Dumbledore's expectations, Bruce didn't seem to intend to hand the diary to him just like that. "Professor, do you know this name?" Bruce asked. "Was he your student before?" "So be it." Dumbledore nodded. "Bruce, give it to me. The water in this diary is too deep for you to grasp." Bruce still hasn't handed over the diary. This gave Dumbledore some bad thoughts. Wouldn't Bruce have been bewitched by the diary? No, impossible. If Bruce had been bewitched, it would have been impossible to tell him about the diary, and it would have been impossible to say what he had just said. Bruce, do you have any concerns? Dumbledore asked in a gentle tone. This diary is dangerous and should be destroyed immediately. I know. Bruce nodded, his expression struggling, but that's why I don't want to hand over the diary to you like this. Why, Bruce? Dumbledore asked. Because I think this diary is the key to saving Lavender and Professor Snape. The Blues speaks amazingly. After hearing these words, Dumbledore calmed down. He believed that Bruce was a smart kid, and there must be a reason for him to say this. Tell me specifically, Bruce, Dumbledore said. Why do you think so? Because this diary seems to be able to read all my thoughts. Bruce said, he can tell all my secrets, even the fact that I am an orphan. Speaking of this, Bruce's face showed a hint of sadness. Dumbledore's fists clenched under his robe. The killing intent boiled in his heart, but he still suppressed it forcefully and did not reveal it in front of Bruce. Tom, you still have this kind of virtue, always taking advantage of other people's inner weaknesses. When you say Bruce is an orphan, don't you remember that you are also an orphan? Dumbledore swore that he really wanted to drag Voldemort's soul out of the diary and use his most powerful spell to completely destroy it. No need to use the unforgivable curse. Even if Dumbledore didn't use the unforgivable curse, he still wouldn't forgive Voldemort. It's okay, kid. Dumbledore tried to comfort Bruce. You are different from Voldemort. You have a golden spirit. Voldemort. Bruce instantly caught Dumbledore's words. Professor, why did you mention Voldemort? Could it be that this diary? It's over. Dumbledore realized instantly that he had let something slip. The reason he just said that Voldemort didn't talk about Tom was because he subconsciously felt that by just pronouncing Tom's name, Bruce wouldn't notice the seriousness of the problem. But Bruce is sharper than he thought. Oh, Bruce, you're really smart. Dumbledore sighed. Then I won't hide it from you anymore. Tom Riddle is indeed Voldemort's original name. Bruce lowered his head, looking like he didn't know what to do. At least that's how it seemed to Dumbledore. Only Cadem, who was standing on the classroom windowsill, knew what was going on. Bruce encountered the biggest challenge of his career. This guy can't act anymore. Because the information given by Dumbledore was so shocking, Bruce had to make an extremely complicated reaction in a short time. He can't act. Fortunately, although this kid's acting skills are not good, he is still very clever, so he simply lowered his head and stopped acting, leaving Dumbledore to figure out the rest. Hey, I'll take you to Lockhart's for further training another day. Cadem thought in his heart, accept more influence from old artists, and your acting skills will improve. Back to topic. Dumbledore patted Bruce's shoulder gently, telling him not to worry. Professor. At this time, Bruce raised his head and still insisted on his idea. I feel that even if this diary originally belonged to Voldemort, we cannot give up this glimmer of hope. Hope. Dumbledore motioned to Bruce to continue, and he would respect his ideas. Bruce was encouraged and continued. This diary can accurately read my thoughts. That's because of legilimency, Dumbledore explained. And I can feel that he and I are spiritually connected. He wants to devour your soul. Dumbledore made another note to Voldemort. So I was wondering if we could connect him to Professor Snape's soul. Through the diary, we can communicate with the sleeping professor. Dumbledore was suddenly stunned. He thought carefully about Bruce's proposal just now, and then discovered that it does work. The only hidden danger is that Voldemort may become uneasy. But there is a way around it. Bruce, I must express my gratitude to you. The method you just used will probably save 2 lives. Dumbledore said, it's just Voldemort in the diary, and we can't let it go. Otherwise something will happen. Professor, what are you going to do? Bruce asked. Don't worry, just give me the diary. Dumbledore said with a kind face, I have a way to make him obedient. After saying this, Bruce handed the diary to the professor with doubts. You won't turn around and destroy the diary, will you? Bruce finally asked. I promise you. Dumbledore promised. Finally, Bruce left. He successfully completed all the tasks of this trip, and left the rest to the old principal. Dumbledore watched Bruce leave, then apparated back to the principal's office. He sat at his desk and opened the diary. It was blank without any writing. Dumbledore picked up his quill and let a drop of ink fall onto the page. The ink seeped out instantly, and then a line of words appeared in the blank space. Bruce, I have thought carefully about a solution. Dumbledore looked at the words and sneered in his heart, but did not rush to write. Writings continued to appear in the diary. We don't need to do it ourselves to ruin Harry Potter's reputation. I wonder if you have ever heard of Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. That is a chamber that can only be opened by the heir of Slytherin. Salazar left a monster in the secret room, and I happen to know how to control it. How about we release the monster, kill a few students in the castle, and then pour all the dirty water on Potter? Don't worry, no one will notice as long as I'm here. Dumbledore finally couldn't stand it anymore. In order to slander Harry, he would kill several students just by opening his mouth. Tom, have you been like this since you were a student? Fortunately, Bruce has the ability to distinguish, otherwise he might be dragged into the abyss by you. Dumbledore took up his pen and wrote in his diary. The basilisk is dead. Dead. Impossible. Riddle's shock was visible to the naked eye, and his handwriting was a bit messy. But then, he noticed something was wrong. This is not Bruce's handwriting. Who are you? Yes, who am I? Dumbledore looked expressionless and wrote in his diary, long time no see, Tom. Wait, Riddle seemed to realize something. But it's too late. You mean Voldemort divided his soul into 7 parts? Bruce was a little stunned when he heard Cadam's story. This was the first time he knew these secrets. Bruce had read about how painful it is to have a divided soul. Voldemort had to experience this kind of pain 6 times. Voldemort is really cruel to others, and even more cruel to himself. Bruce shook his head and said, and among these 7 Voldemorts, I'm afraid the one in the diary is the worst. I don't know what evil he did. First he fell into the hands of Grindelwald and was played with a psychological shadow. Now it was Dumbledore's turn to deal with him. Being served by 2 legendary wizards in turns, Voldemort was truly blessed. He's not miserable, at least he's still alive. Cadam corrected him, at least as far as I know, there are already 3 erased souls of Voldemort. 2 of them were wiped out in front of Voldemort. The next step is to wait for Dumbledore. Owl changed the topic and said with great expectation, Snape's dream must be very interesting. Just do something serious. Bruce no longer wanted to get involved in Cadam's troubles. At this moment, shouts suddenly came from the distance, and someone was calling Bruce's name. Bruce turned around and found Neville running towards him. Judging from the way he was panting, he must have run quite a distance to find him. What's wrong, Neville? What happened? As soon as Bruce opened his mouth, Neville caught him. Bruce, come here quickly. Neville said in panic, Hermione is going to duel with a girl. Bruce, Hermione, duel, how did these 2 words come together? But Cadam didn't find it surprising. Hermione was not a delicate little girl to begin with. She had a lot of strength and means. She punched Malfoy harder than anyone else in the movie. Don't worry, Neville, just talk it over. Bruce let Neville take a breath before asking, did Hermione challenge someone else to a duel? Neville nodded repeatedly. Yes, I was there at the time. With whom? Bruce asked. She's a student from Ravenclaw, her name is. Neville thought for a long time before finally remembering the little witch's name, Ravenna. Bruce followed Neville and ran all the way to the Great Hall. Neville couldn't run anymore, and Bruce was basically carrying him forward. On the way, Bruce roughly understood the situation. The cause of the incident was a bit strange. The conflict between the 2 girls was actually Lockhart, that loser. A star-chasing girl fought for love. Bruce didn't quite understand. The Great Hall was soon reached. Neville half leaned out from behind Bruce and shouted from inside, don't fight. Don't fight. But after entering, he found that everything was Neville's overreaction. The 2 sides didn't actually fight. On the contrary, the 2 sides were unusually harmonious at the moment. Hermione and Ravenna sat side by side, and the long table was full of books, all of which were Lockhart's works. I must recommend this one to you now. Hermione picked up Lockhart's autobiography, The Magic Me, and introduced it to Ravenna. Look at the amazing deeds in it. It's really hard to find another person who is as perfect and humble as him. At this time, Ravenna was in a dazed state. It seemed that she was learning some strange knowledge that she had never touched before. It was very strange, but he couldn't help but want to take another look. At this moment, Bruce wanted to kill someone. He put Neville down and asked with gritted teeth, "Didn't you say they were dueling?" Neville couldn't figure out the situation. "No," he said, "I clearly heard Hermione say, 'Then I'll let you see it.'" "What's the situation?" Bruce asked. At this time, Neville had the energy to narrate the cause and effect. In fact, the matter was very simple. There was a group of little witches from Ravenclaw studying in the hall, and then they talked about Lockhart. Basically, the evaluation of Lockhart by other little witches was extremely positive, and only Ravenna raised objections. The two sides debated for a while, but no one could argue with Ravenna, and they all lost. At this time, Hermione, who had been eavesdropping on the side, joined the battlefield. Then, Neville didn't know what happened next, because he saw that things were not going well and ran directly to Bruce. "Hey, Neville." Bruce really didn't know what to say. At this time, a happy voice sounded behind them. "Hello, I just heard you mention my name." Bruce turned around and saw Gilderoy Lockhart standing behind them. He was wearing a blue robe, with a wizard hat hanging diagonally on his head, and he looked very energetic. Lockhart looked at Hermione and Ravenna in the distance and smiled with white teeth. "It seems that I will have another little fan, which is great. Miss Ravenna has always had some opinions about me before." Bruce glanced at Lockhart and found that he looked calm when talking to him, as if the previous things had not happened. I don't know if he was pretending or really didn't care. After Lockhart showed up, he left quickly. It seems that he appeared here just to confirm that he really had a little fan. Bruce felt a little puzzled. He couldn't understand Lockhart's train of thought. After Lockhart left, Ketum fell on Bruce's shoulder. "Did you notice that Lockhart was a little strange today?" The owl said. "He smells much better than before, as if he had sprayed perfume." Bruce looked at Ketum with a strange look. "What does it have to do with you whether Lockhart smells good or not?" "That's divine magic perfume," Bruce said. "Generally speaking, people who are dating will spray this kind of perfume. The so-called magic perfume is essentially a diluted potion. Bruce even knows how to make this kind of perfume. Lockhart may be going on a date today, which has nothing to do with us." Bruce was not surprised at all. Although Lockhart didn't have a girlfriend on the surface, it didn't mean that he really didn't have one. After all, he basically has all female fans, and he didn't dare to announce his girlfriend officially. Seeing that Hermione had nothing to do and looked very busy, Bruce didn't say hello and left quietly. His most important task at the moment is to train Transfiguration well. In the study room, the bell rang. Bruce looked up at the wall clock. The hour hand pointed at 9. It was 9 o'clock in the evening, curfew time. Bruce stretched and closed the book in front of him. This Transfiguration textbook recommended by Dumbledore tells the life stories of famous Transfiguration masters from ancient times to the present. After reading it once, Bruce broadened his horizons. "Wake up, Ketum, we should go back." Bruce pushed the owl lying on the table, drooling. Ketum flew to Bruce's shoulder in a daze, closed his eyes and continued to sleep. Ketum might be the only owl that can be so sleepy at night. Bruce didn't care. He tucked the book under his arm, left the study room, and prepared to return to the Hufflepuff dormitory. There were no people in the corridor. Bruce walked forward and was about to turn a corner when a figure suddenly bumped into him. He stopped in an emergency and didn't really bump into her. "Are you okay? Is that you?" Bruce was just asking out of courtesy, but he didn't expect that he knew the person on the other side. Ravenna Royal, the girl who was still listening to Hermione preach at noon. "You know me." Ravenna looked up at Bruce. "Of course we know each other, the school is just that big." Bruce frowned and asked, "It's going to be curfew soon, why are you still out?" "I dropped something in the classroom." "Get it and go back right away." Ravenna made a casual excuse, and Bruce knew she was lying. But he didn't expose it either. Ravenna was running around, and Filch would naturally take care of her when the time came. Bruce and Ravenna passed by each other. The clock on the wall had already reached 9:10, and most of the lights in the corridor were turned off. The break was over and Bruce's body clock was rebelling. During his time at Hogwarts, he had a very regular schedule, and before he knew it, sleepiness had hit his brain. Bruce quickened his pace, the Hufflepuff common room already in sight. Then, something seemed to trip over his feet, and Bruce staggered, finally regaining his balance. What? Bruce pulled out the Supreme Wand and used the fluorescent spell to illuminate the surroundings. Then he saw clearly what tripped him, and in an instant, his sleepiness disappeared without a trace. Gilderoy Lockhart, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, who was supposed to have a date today, was lying on the ground, motionless. There was a smile hanging on the corner of his mouth, which was different from the sunshine he showed in the past, but looked a little weird. His breathing was even, and the scent of magic perfume still lingered in Bruce's nose. The third victim appears. Bruce's whole body tensed up. He didn't expect that after Snape's accident, the third victim would appear so soon. We must inform others quickly. Bruce turned around and headed to the principal's office. In fact, he could just scream now and quickly attract the teacher. But Bruce thought about it and let it go. He walked quickly down the corridor, the clocks ticking around him. The time shown above is 11:10 midnight, etc. Bruce suddenly stopped. He looked at the hands of the clock and couldn't believe his eyes. 10 past 11. But the time he looked at just now was still 10 past 9, wasn't it? Why did 2 hours pass suddenly? Kadam, Kadam. He pushed the owl awake on his shoulder. What's the fuss about? The owl muttered, haven't you reached the common room yet? What common room? Bruce finally caught the opportunity for revenge and slapped the owl in the face. However, at this moment, the owl's confused eyes suddenly widened, and it flew into the air at an extremely fast speed, even leaving a string of afterimages along the way. I'm guarding against this move from you. The owl's sleepiness had disappeared, and he said angrily, I knew you would come back with revenge sooner or later. I don't have time to talk to you about this. Bruce pointed to the hands on the clock and confirmed with Kadam, didn't you find it strange? Suddenly, 2 hours passed. 2 hours. Kadam glanced at the clock and noticed something was wrong. Oh, the owl said in surprise, I squinted for a while, and 2 hours have passed. When did his sleep quality get so good? That's not what happened. At this time, Bruce's heart was beating fast. He had a vague feeling that something big might be about to happen. Lockhart was still lying in the corridor, but that wasn't the point. The point is that I lost 2 hours while fully awake. We have to go find Dumbledore. Bruce had no intention of acting alone this time, so asking the principal to explore the situation first was the best choice. Bruce is now very familiar with the road to the principal's office. But before he reached his destination, he had already met the person he was looking for this time. Dumbledore was wearing pajamas and a coat draped over his shoulders. Beside him were Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick, all looking like they were getting ready to sleep. Several of them stood in front of a door, trying to open it, but were unable to do so. Bruce. Dumbledore saw him, frowned and asked, why are you here? The little wizard should have gone to sleep. I have something to tell you. Bruce said frankly, I was walking back to the dormitory, but suddenly, something very strange happened to me. Dumbledore's brows furrowed even more tightly. Bruce, what you are talking about is not seeing the clock suddenly jump 2 hours, right? Isn't it just me who has encountered this situation? He said nothing, but Dumbledore already got the answer from his expression. It certainly seems so. He sighed, Bruce, you should go back and rest early. You will not be able to participate in what happens next. What happened? Bruce looked at the door. Who lives in here? This has nothing to do with you, Bruce. Dumbledore's voice was still gentle. It's time for you to go back and rest. Bruce was silent for a moment and said, I understand, Principal. He turned and walked away without looking back. At this time, Kadam stood on his shoulder and said, I guessed whose room that is. I guessed it too, Bruce said. This is obvious. That room is probably the room where Godric Gryffindor recuperates. Bruce, why are you back again? Dumbledore frowned as he saw Bruce leaving and returning. At this time, they were still trying to open the door to that room. But no matter how he tried, whether it was a lock-picking spell or an explosion spell, Dumbledore even tried to break the wall directly. The result is no. There is a faint force that completely seals this room. No matter how hard you try, you can't enter. Even if you want to take a look inside, you can't. This room seems to no longer belong to this world. At this moment, Bruce, who was supposed to leave, came back. No matter how good-tempered Dumbledore was, he was still a little angry. Do you know what the situation is now? There is a danger spreading that even he cannot confirm. When Bruce comes here, he puts himself in danger. But Bruce then gave a legitimate reason that Dumbledore couldn't refuse. He looked anxious and said, "Mr. Principal, the third victim has appeared, Professor Lockhart." What? At this moment, Dumbledore's eyelids began to beat wildly. What's going on today? Things happen one after another in the school. But he couldn't leave here now. After trying to calm down, he said to Professor McGonagall, "Minerva, please go and bring Gilderoy to Madame Pomfrey. I will make arrangements for what happens next." Professor McGonagall nodded and left with Bruce. Bruce didn't say a word along the way and looked worried. He must be really worried about Lockhart. Professor McGonagall sighed in her heart. The various pressures in the school recently have inevitably been conveyed to the students. Maybe now, suspending classes is the best option. But unnoticed by Professor McGonagall, Bruce was constantly exchanging information with Kadam. "Can't you see anything clearly?" Bruce asked. "You can't see clearly, that room has been isolated," Kadam said, "and Bruce, I'm afraid I have to remind you of something very important." "You say?" Kadam recalled what he had just observed in the Gryffindor room, confirmed that his feeling was correct, and then said to Bruce, "That kind of isolation power is not magic that belongs to this world." Bruce was lost for a moment. The meaning of Kadam's words could not be clearer. "Indeed, this school year is almost halfway over, but I still haven't heard any news about the pursuers from the 600th world." Bruce did not let down his guard, in fact he had been preparing. But sometimes he also wonders whether it's because there have been pursuers in this world, so Barbados doesn't send new ones, or maybe he won't send pursuers so quickly. But the current situation has fully demonstrated that the pursuers have actually arrived a long time ago. Only this time, the opponent is not Jason's bluffing character, but has been lurking in the dark, and has even sneaked into Hogwarts. Bruce's footsteps suddenly stopped. He began to recall every moment of the past half-school year, trying to find the hidden person. At this time, Professor McGonagall noticed that Bruce had stopped where he was and turned back in confusion. "Bruce, what's wrong with you?" "It's okay, Professor McGonagall." Bruce smiled. "I just felt a little upset in my stomach just now." He followed Professor McGonagall's footsteps again. "I know, Kadam." Bruce's tone was firm. "The reason why we didn't find the pursuer was not because we were negligent, but because Hogwarts had an insider." "I think so too." Kadam nodded. Bruce continued. "The reason is very simple. If the pursuers really exist, then it is impossible for me to not notice anything, because I am their only target. There have been at least 4 victims this school year: Lavender, Snape, Lockhart, and maybe a Gryffindor. They keep getting attacked and nothing happens to me. Something is obviously wrong." Kadam had no problem with that analysis. "That's what I thought too," he said. Bruce made the final conclusion. "So I think the pursuer must have reached an agreement with someone in Hogwarts. He must first complete a certain goal and then come to catch me." "I think so too," Kadam finally said. Bruce actually had an immature guess, but there was no evidence. Perhaps, the person who cooperated with the pursuer was Rowena Ravenclaw. But whenever Bruce wanted to reason about this, there seemed to be a hazy fog in his mind. Something stopped him from continuing to think. Bruce and Professor McGonagall arrived at the location of Lockhart's accident. The poor defense against the dark arts teacher was still lying there, smiling, but no longer as charming as before. Alas, poor Lockhart. Professor McGonagall sighed. He must have encountered a very powerful enemy and resisted bravely. Look at his posture. He is still in a fighting state. Bruce nodded. Indeed, because this pose was done by Kadam after he woke up from his sleep. According to him, if everything is irreversible in the end and Lockhart dies because of this, then at least let him die decently. Lockhart was not in bad shape, and it was obviously not easy for Professor McGonagall to move him. Just as Bruce was about to help, he saw Professor McGonagall taking out her wand and clicking it a few times out of thin air. Lockhart's body floated up, maintaining a standing posture, tilting his head, and followed Professor McGonagall. "Let's go." Professor McGonagall went to the school hospital. Lockhart tilted his head and floated behind, rising and falling. This picture seems a bit strange no matter how you look at it. After Bruce helped deliver Lockhart to the ward, he did not stay there, but returned to the common room at the forced request of Professor McGonagall. "It's too dangerous out there now." Back in the room, Bruce said to Kadam, "It must be the past few days, right?" "Probably," Kadam said. "Gryffindor has an accident, so no one in the school is safe now. If Dumbledore doesn't act, Hogwarts will be closed." Bruce nodded. Now he could only wait. Waiting for the day when Dumbledore succeeds in converting Voldemort. Bruce originally thought that it would be at least a few days. But in fact, the next day, people from the Ministry of Magic came. And it was none other than the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. The conversation between him and Dumbledore was secret and no one could observe it. But Kadam is different. Who can say no to an owl that everyone loves? "Dumbledore, I have taken on a lot of pressure for you." Fudge and Dumbledore sat facing each other, and the anxiety on his face was visible to the naked eye, "But you can't make no progress at all. At least you have to come up with something and let me explain to the Parliament, right?" "Actually, Connolly, we've made progress." Dumbledore took out the diary and placed it on the table. There are some black scorch marks on the diary cover, as if it had been burned by fire. "What is this?" Fudge frowned. It looked like it was just an ordinary diary. What key clue could it be? "Tomorrow afternoon, we will conduct a mediumship ceremony through this diary," Dumbledore said. "At that time, we will find out the true identity of the murderer. Connolly, if you are interested, you can come and watch." "I definitely want to come and see it." Fudge's killer instinct as a politician was activated instantly. The importance of Hogwarts in the British wizarding world goes without saying. There is a big crisis in the school and people are panicked. And when the crisis is resolved, as the Minister of Magic, if I am present, I will get big bonus points. Fudge had already decided that not only was he going to come, he was also going to bring reporters. Dumbledore saw what he was thinking and reminded him lightly, "Journalists are not allowed to enter the ceremony." In Dumbledore's original plan, he did not want too many people to enter the ceremony. But the news leaked out too quickly, and someone came to the door that afternoon. First up is Harry. He looked at Dumbledore with a helpless expression and spoke his request almost like a pleading. "Except for Professor Snape, I have almost nothing left," he cried and said. "Whether this ceremony is successful or not, I want to be by his side." Dumbledore wanted to refuse, but when he looked up and saw Harry's eyes, the words of refusal could not come out of his mouth. What could he say? Dumbledore knows how pitiful Harry is. His parents died because of his godfather's betrayal, and his aunt was almost abusive to him. The only person who gave Harry the warmth of family was Snape. "Okay, Harry, you can participate." Dumbledore sighed, "But I hope you will stay calm no matter what you see." "I will." Harry nodded heavily. When Harry left the office fell into a long silence. Then, someone knocked on the office door. The door opened and it was Bruce. "Professor, I want to participate in the psychic ceremony," he said straight to the point. "This request is simply baffling." Dumbledore frowned and asked, "Bruce, you don't usually care that much about Professor Snape, do you?" "Not Professor Snape." Bruce looked sad. "I care about Professor Lockhart." "Ah." Dumbledore racked his brains and couldn't imagine when the relationship between Bruce and Lockhart had become so good. "Headmaster, you may not know that Professor Lockhart and I are close friends," Bruce said without blushing. "There are almost no secrets between him and me, sincerely for sincerity." "Go out." Dumbledore couldn't stand listening anymore, and everyone came here to find out what they wanted to do. Psychic rituals are very dangerous, and you don't know what you might attract if you don't pay attention. If the underage wizard stays there, not only will he not be able to help at all, but he will also distract other people's energy. You can only add one Harry at most, and absolutely no one else. He originally wanted to do it secretly, but unfortunately it was not successful. After all, who leaked the news? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.